Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2022 FIDE's Women's Candidates. I'm Alessia Santeramo, and I'm here today one more time with the amazing Anna-Maja Kazarian. Hello, Anna-Maja.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Alessia. I'm so excited for this event. In this event, we are going to see the winner of this event will be facing the current Women's World Champion, Wenjun. So I'm super excited to commentate this event together with you, and I'm really looking forward to the matches we have today. Let's have a look at the bracket, everyone, because this event is split in two parts. We have Pool A and we have Pool B. And currently, we are looking at Pool B. What happened in Pool A, Alessia?
Well, there was a lot of fight already, and there is a winner. Her name is Lei Tingley, and she will be fighting against the winner of the Pool B. And then finally, we will have a World Champion Challenger. And then there will be the match, I guess.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And today we have two matches in Pool B. We have Alexandra Goryachkina against Alexandra Kosteniuk, the two Alexandras facing each other. And we have the other match between Katerina Lagno and Tan Jong-gi. So yesterday, the first round started and we had some very exciting games. Alexandra Goryachkina was very close to win the game, but unfortunately for her, she was not able to convert her very nice position into a full point. So both matches ended in a draw, and yeah, we will have 3 more games basically, and today is round 2, and I'm super excited to see what will happen today.
Exactly, as you said, yesterday was a huge fight, and we saw that Alexandra Goryachkina had a very nice chance that she didn't manage to convert into a victory. So how is her approach today? This is very interesting. Now we see in the full camera Alexandra Goryachkina staying at the board, staring at the pieces. But today in a very elegant purple. Yes, I said yesterday that I remember Alexandra Goryachkina since she was very small. We are same age, class 1998. We have played many European and World Youth Chess Championship, and I remember her for her eyes, for the stare. And she plays with her moves, with her brain, with her eyes too. And now, of course, we see also Katerina Lagno with the white pieces, and she's drinking a bit of water, getting ready to the fight. So we will have a fight, right, Anna-Maja?
Absolutely, they're getting ready, and yeah, it's interesting to see that they're, I mean, typically you either see people go really early to their board or you see them like coming in the final minute. And it's just interesting to see that those two players are, relatively early to their game. But there's 5 minutes until the start of the game. So I'm really looking forward to see those games, how they will start. But before we get into the games, everyone, let's talk about the prizes, because there's a huge prize fund of 250,000 euros in this whole event. The number 1 goes home with 60,000 euros, number 2 goes home with 50,000 euros, and there's also prizes for 3rd and 4th place, 30,000 euros, and the others 5th to 8th place receive 20,000 euros each. That's not a bad prize fund, right, Alessia?
Yes, I can't wait for the moment we will play a match against each other and we will have this total prize fund. And it's a very nice, and we're happy that women's chess gets support, and that's just very, very appreciated. But let's go into this match format. What is about these individual matches? Because every match will be 4 games. They will be playing for 4 days. We are at day 2. And then they will play the semifinals. We are right now at the quarterfinals, 4 matches. Time control is 90 minutes plus 30 seconds of increment. And as we said yesterday many times, after move 40, there is an important moment, 30 more minutes on the board. Don't forget that, and it's important to have extra time for the last phase of the game. Also, very important, you cannot offer a draw before move 40. So this is also a very important thing we need to take under consideration. And yesterday we saw that after move 40, the game dramatically went to an end pretty quickly.
Right, and both games ended on move 40 pretty much. As soon as they could offer a draw, they did. But you might say that, oh, they were just waiting for move 40 to happen. But the games were actually really exciting. And when move 40 arrived, suddenly the dust was cleared and it was a clear draw. There was not much to be played for anymore. So I'm curious to see, will the players go for another fighting start? Or will the games result in a draw? Let's see. Both players have now arrived. We see Alexandra Kosteniuk also sitting at her board, being very focused. What do you typically do when you arrive at your board? Do you feel like looking at your pieces and trying to remember your opening, or do you just look around and like Alexandra Goryachkina is doing?
I think first of all you need to adjust your pieces and
Good
place
call.
the knight in the way. There's a clear difference between chess players how you place your knight on a real board, because some players are placing knight towards the opponent king, some players are just making the knight on the side so they can see their face, and it's a very really very a big difference. So I place my knight, and then I just try not to load myself with too much pressure, so I'm not too focused. I try maybe to stand up, walk, take some water, and then I try to get just full immersion ready for the game. What about you, Anamaya?
Yeah, for me it's it's difficult. I really want to look at my remember my opening and look at the board, but I feel so intimidated when sitting in front of my opponent, and I don't feel like trying to look at my pieces where they go in the opening, because what if I suddenly forget a move, or what if my opponent can see what I'm thinking about or whatever. So it's really difficult for me. By the way, we see Tan Shougi just sitting down just 1 minute before the start of the game. So that was a close call. But yeah, I like to be there early and just relax a little bit, and just adjusting my pieces. I find it very important. I put my knights basically diagonally. I don't know how to explain it, but their faces are faced diagonally towards my opponent. It's very important.
It's like you're watching directly to the target that is opponent's king. Aronian once told me his philosophy about knights, and at the beginning of the game, he wants knight to be looking at him, so that they know who is the captain. And then, as soon they make the first move, they're looking at the opponent king, that is the enemy. So it's very precise. And here we have an handshake, and the game are about to start.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you, photographer. Which move? And here we see, I think it's an e-pawn.
E4, that's E4. Yes. What will Alexandra play? E5 as well, just like yesterday.
Oh yeah, I was checking out a bit what those players have played before in OTB, and Alexandra Goryachkina is really playing any move at move 1. She plays d4, e4, knight c3, c4, and she plays them all at very high level. But the most likely move was this e4, and then I was clearly expecting e5. And in the other game instead, I said to Anamaya, we might have a Najdorf. And there you have. We have e4, c5, so we have a Sicilian. We might have a very sharp game. And my prediction is a Najdorf with
Bishop b5. I can confirm, guys, she did tell me that it's going to be Bishop b5.
Oh, no. Actually, they played a game last year, and I played with Najdorf with Bishop e2. So, but okay, it's natural that you change, and it's fine to fail a prediction, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it's a great start so far. I'm looking forward to see what happens in the game. In the Najdorf game between Tan Shougi and Katerina Lagno. But let's have a look at the opening of Alexandra Goryachkina and Alexandra Kosteniuk. So they have the same position as yesterday, but we are again seeing the Berlin, but this time D3, I believe, wasn't played very early. So D3 is not played whatsoever. So short castle's played. Now, will Alexandra take on E4? Okay, Bishop E7. Okay.
Right now we are in the very, very main line that might lead to the close Spanish. if white plays rook e1, now is the question. Rook e1 will be played or d3 will be played. I expect one of these two. And rook e1 is like the classical way to continue with white. D3 is like the modern approach, avoids lots of theory and leads to new types of positions. And then, as we discussed yesterday, black can choose different approaches, can try to go for the martial attack with castle very early and preparing a very quick d5. And here we have rook e1 on the board. And now the question is, actually black needs to play a very precise move here. Because white, yes, is the move b5. Let's shortly pause here because I want to explain. So the idea of the Spanish is that, let's go at move 3, just very generally. So the idea is that we are attacking the defensor of the e5 pawn, right? But after a6 is not working, bishop takes e6. Let's take on c6, pawn takes, and we cannot capture the pawn on e5 even if it looks good, because that would be queen d4. The queen is attacking the knight and the pawn at the same time, and this would be a very big problem for white. Reason why, for all the next move after a6, white cannot capture the knight. So plays bishop back, and now knight f6, castle, bishop e7. But as soon as rook e1 is played, the pawn on e4 is now protected one more time, and so it's time for black to protect the pawn on e5. And that's why here, and exactly at this moment, the move b5 is played.
Okay.
Bishop e3, only move.
And short castle was played.
Okay, so black is going for the marshal. And now there are like many ways to avoid this, like a4, c3, h3, d4. And I'm curious to see which move will Alexandra Goryachkina pick.
Yeah, one of the main moves to avoid the marshal is called anti-marshal, is a4, and she does play that, a4. And you're basically having a direct attack on this pawn, because after, if you leave this pawn, let's say a move like d6 is played, then you can take the pawn, and this pawn is pinned, because the rook will be hanging on a8. So that is not going to happen. You have to solve this problem, and you can play one of those moves is bishop b7, simply defend the rook, and it's not very appealing for white to capture right away. You want to keep this tension on the b pawn. And if you trade, you give black a lot of space and opportunities. So you want to keep this tension on the b5 pawn. Let's see what Alexandra Kosteniuk does here. But I'm sensing she'll go for the move bishop b7. What do you think?
Yeah, here there are some moves that black can consider. Bishop b7 is one, rook b8 is one, sometimes b4. Rook b8 and bishop b7 are the typical moves. And I believe, yes, definitely one of these. And honestly here, I have played this in my recent OTB tournament with the white pieces, and there are so many sharp lines. Black can really go crazy with some d5, with sacrificing multiple pawns. So I'm really curious how this game will go on, because it can lead to very sharp positions. It's lots of new theory, and I'm curious. Bishop b7 or rook b8? I bet one of these moves. Okay, you say bishop b7. Oh, you won.
yeah, bishop b7 has been played, right? Yeah, it's a very typical move. You're not only developing your bishop, but also defending the rook, and it feels like one of those natural moves in the real Lopez. So now it's white's turn. What are white's moves here? You can, as I mentioned before, a takes b5 is a move you don't want to play so quickly. I might play it in bullet because I don't see another move. But yeah, basically one of the main moves is c3, d3 as well, to simply develop the bishop and the knight at some point. Perhaps you can even play d4, but it feels like if you play d4 right away, you're weakening a lot of squares. So it might not be so beneficial. Which move would you go for here?
I think the new move is like the move d3, if I'm not wrong, is like the most flexible approach, without sometimes even some idea like bishop d2, because you want to avoid knight a5.
Right,
knight a5 right now seems like a possible. After d3, is also possible to play actually knight a5, and is the line that I said can lead to some craziness, because you're leaving the pawn on e5 hanging, and there might be a quick d5 and very, very complex variations. So d5, d3 is a bit the more modern approach, but any move is here. Many moves are here good, like you mentioned, c3. D4 seems very sharp, and d3 is on the board.
Okay, we see
So
d3. That's a very standard approach. Basically, you want to develop this bishop. You have a lot of options. Sometimes the bishop goes to g5. Sometimes you even stay with the bishop on c1 still because you want to develop the knight instead. And we saw yesterday how this knight can maneuver all the way across the board. It typically goes to d2 and then go to f1, and you'll have the choice to put it on e3 or on g3. And the main goal is to put the knight on f5 or support the square d5 and don't allow your opponent d5 so easily. So yeah, I'm curious to see how Kosteniuk will respond to this. Will she go for this craziness that you mentioned, knight a5? Okay, she goes for a solid approach,
she
d6.
goes for the solid approach. Yes, here there are d5, knight a5, very crazy line. D6 is a solid approach. And now the question is, how will Alexandra Goryachkina develop her knight? Because as you mentioned, the classic plan is knight d2, but also in this particular line, the knight can also go on c3. Because the knight on c3 is attacking the pawn on b5, and then can do the same things as in the other line, can just go on e2, g3, but also can go on d5 in some lines. So it's a bit more, it's multitasking. I like when pieces are doing different things because you put more pressure on your opponent and you keep more options open. And that's why white is not playing a too early c3 like in other Spanish lines.
Right.
To keep this flexibility with the knight. So I'm very curious. Oh, bishop d2, avoiding knight a5. This is a new move.
As you mentioned. Wow. Yeah, so stopping knight a5 and basically would you say that knight c3 would still be possible even though that would block your bishop from covering a5?
Yes, sometimes that move is possible, and because you have the square on a2, and for the bishop to go back, and the pawn on a4 is still protected by the knight.
Right.
So could be a possibility, but I'm not totally sure because every move order things might change. And sometimes you can even leave the bishop on b3. For example, after knight c3, the pawn on b5 is under attack, and so sometimes you can win a pawn. You have double pawns, and then you need to evaluate what is the position after all the trades. So yeah, sometimes now black might reroute the knight on f6. There are some moves possible like knight d7, knight c5. Those are possible moves. And I'm curious to see how black goes on because black has all the pieces out, right?
Right, yeah, and it feels like black is passive, but at some point black will be able to push c5 or f5, and there's a lot of ways to maneuver here with the black pieces. I always get frightened when my opponent plays knight h5, knight f4. This knight on f4 is so annoying to deal with, and sometimes, well, in this current position, you cannot play knight h5 for the simple reason that you can sacrifice on e5. But if knight h5 is possible without losing material, it's really annoying to deal with. And yeah, you don't want to play g3 voluntarily to stop the knight from going to f4. That weakens a lot of light squares, and it feels a bit unnecessary. And also, if you want to get your knight to g3 at some point, there will be a pawn instead of a knight, and it will be difficult for your knight to find a good square. So yeah, let's see what Kosteniuk decides to do here. There's a lot of options, as we mentioned. Currently, knight h5 doesn't work, but I like your plan with knight d7. And you could also potentially, after king h8, you can push the pawn to f5. And especially with the bishop on b7, look how active it can get once this pawn on e4 is gone. So yeah, there's a lot of ideas for both sides. And yeah, it gives you so many options in Ruy Lopez. Typically, it might feel like white has the upper hand because they have a lot of moves available, a lot of opportunities. But at the same time, black also has quite a lot of plans.
Absolutely. And here I see many different possible approaches that Alexandra Kosteniuk can choose. Like b4 is also a move. At one point, black wants to solve the problem of the pawn on b5 under attack. And also maybe block the knight to go on c3. Because right now, the only available square for the knight is c3 or a3. And b4 would be blocking them all. and the knight cannot go on d2 because it's the bishop on d2. So this suddenly becomes a move that makes lots of sense. Then the question is the pawn weak on b4 or is it a good pawn? And it's always a debate about is weak or strong. Sometimes a5 can follow to support the pawn.
Oh, this
For
one.
black, yes.
I can play
Oh,
I can play a5, and yeah, perhaps that's the problem. If you play b4 right away, then white plays a5, and after rook a4, you have to figure out how to defend that pawn on b4. So you
yeah.
have to indeed calculate it precisely and calculate it through. But I like your idea to play b4 because yeah, this knight doesn't have many squares, so yeah, it's one way to stop White's development, and yeah, that's
But
the tough
yesterday,
part. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I agree. It's not easy to. Yeah, I think yesterday we saw something clear that the players are playing slow in a way. They don't like to make pawn pushes too early. Chat was screaming for an f4, g3, h4, and we saw that the player was slowly building up the position. So might be that we just get a move like queen d7 or queen c8 that is maybe controlling some extra squares and trying to just see what is next, what is white gonna do. So also a slow move like this might be. Also, you mentioned king h8 or h6. Okay, you need always to be careful in the Spanish to play moves like h6 because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you want to play the move g6 to control the f5 square. And so, of course, if you played h6, then you cannot play anymore g6. So you need really to be careful in this with black to play h6 or g6 and to choose wisely which one to play. So maybe not really h6, but any other waiting moves. Oh, b4 actually. No, they go for sharp.
Okay, b4 has been played indeed, and yeah, you were making a good point about h6 that it feels like an appealing move because you know there's no knight jump or bishop jump to g5 anymore, and you also create some luft for your king. But h6 is one of those moves in this real Lopez that you want to avoid if possible because if my knight gets to f5, I'm really looking forward to sacrifice on h6. I don't care if that costs me a piece, but the attack on the king can be really powerful. So you have to be careful with this pawn push to h6. This bishop is always looking at it, and it doesn't really matter for the bishop if it has to sacrifice itself because there might be a crushing attack. But now b4 has been played, so one of the questions that arises after this move is a5 a viable move because it opens up the square a4 for the rook to attack this pawn on b4. But at the same time, a5 might also be weakening the pawn itself on a5, and perhaps black does have some time to defend this pawn. What would you say are one of the candidate moves for white here?
I really like your a5. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's very because if a5 is happening for black, then the pawn on b4 is very stable. Instead, like this, you're giving a double-edged pawn structure. a5 for white, the b4 is weak, the a5 is weak. But potentially, if you manage to exchange those pawns, then white has the advantage because the pawn on a6 is weak after all.
Mm-hmm.
So I like your a5. Also blocks a bit the position for black. That doesn't have too much space. There is not anymore a great square for the knight on a5, which is always something that you are scared of or looking how to face that move because you want to keep the bishop on b3. The light square bishop in the Spanish is the hero. So you try to keep it or to exchange it very early in a very early stage and move 3. So now white decided to keep that bishop, and so white wants to preserve it.
Mm-hmm.
So I like your a5.
Yeah, makes a
And
lot of sense. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, okay, what else? And you don't have a way to develop the knight, so maybe you need to move one more time the bishop. So maybe bishop g5. Now that you provoked the move e4, this could be an option to give the knight another square. But again, I think like the move a5, I really like. I'm curious to see what chat think about that move. Mostly they like pawn push. I saw that BH13 was suggesting h4 is always the best move. I don't agree with that, but you know, it's Pretty funny.
Yeah, no, normally I would say yes, h4 is the move, but in this position, I already feel anxious about the square g4. Imagine the bishop decides to go there, and good luck defending your knight on f3. And this pawn is also not going anywhere. But if h4, h5, h6 was possible, we would be talking about something completely different. But unfortunately for white, h4, h5 is not going to work out here. But remember, yesterday we had this idea with the inclusion of g3, and with g3 it may just work, but once again, it's way too slow. I typically go for the real opposite myself. I go for a different line with h3 and g4. And I get really ambitious on the king side that way. Once my knight goes all the way to g3, and I just start pushing the pawns on the king side. And at some point, I started to realize it's not a great line, but it has been very effective for me. So I like this pawn
She
push.
went for c3, and I like this. If chat likes to push pawns, c3 d4 is the way you should do it. So
right.
I like it. Also, c3 gives a square for the knight, and this is definitely a move that that needs always to be taken in consideration. It's a typical move in the Spanish, and white is just preparing to push on d4 one day. And white took it slow with the move d3, but one day d4 will happen, sooner or later. And now the question is, Anna Maya, will black exchange the pawn on b4 with the pawn on c3? So will b takes c3 happen, opening up the b file?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the problems, as you mentioned earlier, this a6 pawn feels very lonely. So once you exchange those pawns, I have to decide still with what I want to take back. Let's say b takes c3. I mean, you have three options, and all of them seem very reasonable. Knight takes is developing the knight, but it leaves the squares a5 and d4 vulnerable. B takes c3 feels pretty good since you're covering the square d4 and you can push d4 yourself at some point. But I want to keep my pawn on b2 actually, because I want to challenge this pawn a6 with the two pawns. But you also have bishop takes c3, and bishop takes c3 is covering the squares a5 and d4, but at the same time, I want to play d4 with the support of the pawn. So it's very hard to decide which capture is the best in this situation. I would probably personally go for, I want to play b takes c3, but then I'm thinking, okay, what happens after a move like d5? There's so many things to consider here. And also after b takes c3, your knight is not developed just yet, and it has to find its way out of here through a3 probably. So I would say b takes c3 is an interesting move, but perhaps you can consider playing a5 here. Simply defend the pawn and actually giving white the question of where is your knight going, because it's blocked on a3. It cannot go to a3. c3 is covered. d2 is covered by the own bishop. So I think a5 will happen. I'm predicting this move will happen. What do you think?
I think you were very precise with your analysis. One move like b takes c3 or a5 will happen. I don't think a crazy move like d5 is something that we might consider, because the pawn on b4 is under attack right now. So we need to find a way to protect it. And d5 is another way to protect it, creative, but I have the feeling that the knight on c6 might be a bit overloaded in defending the b4 pawn and the pawn on e5. So maybe I think e5 will not happen. And then I think b takes c3 will happen. But maybe also a5 is possible. I mean, both are possible. I just, I studied this like 6 months ago, and so I have some memories. But there are shadows, and you tend to forget. So I think there was a B file open at one point. Maybe it was this line.
Okay. There are so many different lines in the real office. I've played this opening for years, and I'm still finding new lines in this opening. I've had some preparations sometimes where I was like, wait, this line also exists, and typically there's the move knight c3 is not so common, because the classical way as you mentioned earlier, knight d2, knight f1, knight g3, and then I was caught by surprise that knight c3 is also a move in the Ruy Lopez, because I remember when I was younger, they would often tell me that knight c3 is the worst move in the opening. So, but it's certainly possible in some of the lines, and that is the beauty of the Ruy Lopez. And yeah, funnily enough, I checked the database, and there have been games where rook b8 was played, simply sacrificing this pawn, which is pretty crazy to me. If there's any move I would consider here, it would definitely be not rook b8, because not only are you giving up the pawn, but you're also allowing the knight to be developed easier, even if it's through a3. I would not want to allow that so easily. So yeah, have you seen rook b8 in your preparation?
Oh no, hell no.
No.
I mean, I was thinking about creative way to defend that pawn, and that's why I came up with the d5 idea.
Yeah.
But I think it's just not too good. But rook b8 I didn't consider, because okay, what's the idea? What are you doing after? Maybe the idea is that after like c take b4, you go with bishop on c8.
Yeah, bishop c8 or bishop a8 seems to be fine, both of them. And I guess you cannot defend the pawn. You have to play b5, and you basically sacrifice the pawn.
Yeah, okay, then it makes some sense. This move, no, is a way to it's a way to keep the tension and say, okay, white, decide what you want to do. Do you want to take on b4, but then I will take back the pawn, and
oh,
no problem.
Yeah, I was checking this opening step because it's a really interesting line, and I wanted to see how it would work out on other moves. And rook b8 seemed like one of the moves mentioned. d5 was also mentioned as one of the top moves, but the main move being played here is b takes c3. So let's see what Alexandra decides to do. They have been spending quite some time early on. What do you think of this time management of them?
Well, I think like this one was not the line that they were fully expecting, and that's why they are thinking, because this is like all the moves. If I was mentioning the moves, is probably well-known theory. So I think that they were probably Alexandra Kosteniuk was slightly surprised. It was not the line that she fully prepared, and that's why she's taking some time. But these 6 minutes are completely fine, because sometimes even in a very early stage, you need to take decision, and you cannot just take back. If you now play b takes c3, this is gonna affect the character of the game. So b5 will be open, and you don't have any more a strong pawn on b4 that is like really dominating the knight on b1 at this point. Let's see, the knight can really go nowhere. So that pawn on b4 is really strong. That's why I liked your suggestion a5, but unfortunately allows a potential pass pawn in for an endgame. So because after c take b4, if a take b4, the a pawn would be hanging, would be passed. So that is a move that you always needs to take care. But okay, I think it's good moment to switch to another game, to the second game, because Alexandra Kosteniuk is taking really a bit of time, so we can come back to this game really soon. What is happening there? I see a rook on e3. That's amazing.
Yeah, a lot of moves have happened, so we will quickly switch to the other game, Lagno between Tan, and we thought it started off with the knight Urf. Let's have a look how it started quickly. Knight f3, d6, bishop b5, bishop d7. We saw this at the very start. Short castle, knight c6. Seems like the players have been playing those moves really quickly. c3, knight f6, rook e1, e6. d4, c takes d4, c takes d4. This looks all very standard. White has the center, d4 and e4 pawns, but those pawns can also be very vulnerable, because once you push the pawn to d5, for example, after e5, you get the square e4 for your knight. And it's actually what happened in the game as well. d5, e5, and knight came all the way to e4. And I've played these kind of structures, not the exact same line, but as you can probably already see, this looks similar like a French setup. So I'm...
but there is an amazing plus. Where is the bishop on c8?
There is no bishop anymore on c8. That is true. So yeah, this is pretty. Actually, this is a really big improvement because the light squared bishop of white is typically on d3, but it's not existent on the board anymore. So this knight on e4 is really strong. And for example, if you want to trade this knight and play knight to c3, after knight takes, this pawn on c3 becomes really weak, and it becomes really easy for black to play around this with knight a5, rook c8, knight c4, and this knight on c4 is really strong. And yeah, basically, black will be the one having the upper hand in this position. So let's see how the game continued. Rook e3 was played, bishop e7, and indeed, knight c3 was played, and after knight takes... Okay, so I thought because of rook e3, rook takes c3 might happen, but instead b takes c3 happened, short castle, and knight e1. So this is the current position. Knight e1 is a rather... surprising move. It's always surprising to see backwards moves, but there's a clear idea, it seems like. Where's this knight heading to?
Yes, this knight is probably giving some place to the rook to go towards the king side, and generally the idea of this line, you're super right about the fact that the pawn on c3 is a weakness, and is a weakness long term. This means that if many pieces are going to be exchanged, black is much better, because there's a clear target, a clear way to attack, but there is a big but. There are still many pieces. And look at the pawn on c3, d45. They are like an arrow, showing white where to go with the attack. White in this position will attack the king side like a crazy man. I like to say this. Rook g3, bishop h6. The knight might go back to f3 or to d3, f4, h5. And sorry for the many arrows, but there is lots of action going on in this position. Personally, I'm a huge fan of playing this position with white. I have played this in many Italian championship. I have also won some very nice game, because white, I mean, you're right, c3 is weak. But before that pawn to be important, black needs to survive a very unpleasant attack. So rook g3, sometimes h4, chat will be happy, and h5, h6, bishop h6, the knight will go towards f4, towards h5. Wow, I get excited by this position with white.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. The attack is very clear, and that's why rook e3 is such a strong move. You are putting the rook on the square to be ready for the attack. Typically, it's just on e1, and it takes some time to maneuver. But here, it's already on e3. You save the move, basically. And... yeah, black hasn't been able to make so much progress. Of course, it should have a decent position as the pawn c3 is weak. And yeah, the queen side is basically for black, but it takes a lot of time to make use of this advantage on the queen side. So I would say that black needs to focus on moves like f6. It's one of the typical moves that we see often in the French defense when you're facing this pawn chain. But the problem with this move is that you're weakening this pawn on e6, and since you don't have the light squared bishop anymore, it becomes really difficult to defend this, and you have to be really careful when playing f6. But on the other hand, how otherwise would you be able to defend this pawn and defend the attack altogether? Because the ideal situation is that after f6, pawn takes, bishop takes f6, and this bishop will be a great defender of this pawn and will be much easier for black to defend. For example, you can even consider playing g6, bishop g7, and it may be a bit more difficult for white to attack on the king side. However, once you play f6, let me quickly show that. F6, white can still counter this by playing f4. And then it becomes a little bit unclear. Of course, this does block the bishop on c1, so maybe it's not as ideal, but there's always these kind of moves that you need to keep in mind, because, yeah, e takes f6 will not happen as easily as you may want it to.
Yes, I think like the move f6 is a very nice way to defend this position, very typical. In this position, I was also shortly thinking about the move bishop g5, just because it helps to simplify the position, and as we said, the endgame would be very, very good for black due to the pawn on c3. In fact, if you can go just a few moves before, I want to show that this line is not like the very main line. Yes, let's bring the rook back to e3, e1, sorry. And in this position, the main move is knight d2.
Mm-hmm.
With the idea of exchanging the knight, the strong knight on e4, but capture on d2 with the bishop, so your pawn structure is safe.
Mm-hmm.
And then you play rook c1, rook c3, knight g5, and you keep going with the attack. And that's why Katerina Lagno, look at her time control, 1 hour 31 minutes. It's like a very long time. She prepared this move, new move, rook e3, very interesting. And instead, Tan Shangi is taking time to figure out how to move on in this position. Rook e3, very interesting move. I will be trying this in my blitz games.
Yeah, that's a very interesting approach to this position, and it's hard to see how black can challenge this. I mean, this bishop has not been developed yet. There is not a lot of weaknesses in white's position. You can start attacking the pawn d4, but you're missing some pieces. There's only been a bishop trade, but it feels like you need even more pieces than you already have to attack this pawn on d4. And that goes to show white's position is pretty decent and the attack is clear. And I would say white has the practical chances. It doesn't reflect, it's not being shown in the engine evaluation, but I would say white has a lot of practical chances, and white is the one that is able to put pressure on black's position. And for black, it might be a bit difficult to defend. With precise play, you might be able to, but this rook e3 move is a killer. Let's see what the current position is with knight e1. So one of the moves that one might consider, it's a typical move to play g6 because you want to, so you're going to move the rook and put the bishop on g7. On g7, the bishop is typically a good defender, but one of the problems in this structure, the pawn structure, is that, for example, rook fc8, you don't want to weaken your dark squares around your king. It's very, very vulnerable otherwise if you do that. And yeah, your bishop is not going to do much on g7. It's going to look at those wall of pawns. And I see people often consider the move g6 to put the bishop on g7. But in this pawn structure, it is very, very much not recommended. The square on e6 will be very, very sad. And look at this knight. It wants to jump there.
Yes, and we have a move actually. Anna-Maja, your f6 is played, is on the board, and Katerina Lagno just immediately, she was not on the board,
okay.
She was probably stretching her legs, and she took immediately on f6, and now we also have a move, is rook take f6.
Okay.
I like this approach. The rook on the f file is exploiting the open f file. Probably the other rook on a8 will soon join. The bishop might go on d6, and black has a problem in this position, is the pawn on e6 that is slightly weak. White might try to bring a knight towards e5, but I think that black figured out a very good practical way to defend against the attack, giving a target to white, the e6 pawn, in exchange of the c3 pawn. I think it's a very logical way to keep going. And now the question is, how is white setting up the pieces? Because this is not an easy task. White needs to be careful because now the f file is open, f2 can be a weakness, and your pieces, as Anna-Maja pointing out, look at them. Oh, rook e2, look at this.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to see white playing so passively. I mean, as you're pointing out, the pieces are not developed, and we want to see them developed. And this knight is able to jump to e5, but it's gonna take some time, and black should be in time to play bishop d6, rook f8, and start pushing themselves. But rook e2, taking it very easy, no rush whatsoever. Yeah, is rook af8 still a useful move, you would ask, because you're not attacking the pawn really. I mean, it's defended right now, so yeah, you might consider playing some other move. But I would say rook af8, I like this move still, because maybe you want to focus on rook g6 and put pressure on the pawn g2. So it's interesting to see the tables turn, because suddenly it's really hard to see how white is going to attack here.
Yes, I think that we need to spend a bit more words about this rook e2, because a few moves before, if we can go at the position before f6, we were just saying that white is gonna attack, rook g3, h4, h5, getting excited. But this happens just if black keeps the pawns stable. So if black tries to attack on the queen side, which moves like rook f c8, knight a5, knight c4. This is what happens typically. Black plays on the queen side, white plays on the king side, and who is faster wins the game usually. But the move f6 changes dramatically the character of the position, because now everything gets much more positional. After pawn take, rook takes, now the pawn on e6 becomes a target, and so there is not any more chances to go for a crazy attack. I'm sorry, there will be not h4 in this game. And so the rook needs to come back to e2, protect the f2 pawn, and leaving space open for the bishop on c1 that can now run towards amazing destination like g5, e3. Well, not f4 probably, but just give a space to those resident slippers that are the white pieces on the first rank, rook, bishop, queen, and knight, that finally will find a purpose in this game and in their life.
Well said. Yeah, and this knight can easily jump to d3. There's so many squares accessible to those pieces. It's gonna take some time, but at the same time, what can black do in the meantime? I mean, rook e2 has been played. Now, what are the candidate moves of black? I would say rook af8 is the first move that comes to mind. Perhaps Tan might be thinking about bishop d6, and perhaps an interesting move to think about is, does black want to go for a move like e5? b5 has been played, but I do want to spend some time on the move bishop d6 to support e5, because you might think that you want to go for this and yeah, simply open up the position and, you know, remove one of your weaknesses. But after knight d3, it becomes a bit difficult to see how you can push this pawn. It could be an idea to focus on, but with the support of the knight and then pawn to f4, this move will be very difficult to play. But obviously, bishop d6 is still a very natural move. However, Tan played the move b5. What do you think of this move, Alessia?
Wow, I'm really shocked. I was reading BJ writing, this is the perfect moment to play f4. Guys, no, don't do that. Pawns are not coming back. Really, you need to think very accurately. And I'm personally surprised about the move b5. I see the idea is blocking the c4 square. This means that white has no possibility to play the move c4 for a very long time, and probably forever. And I loved your idea with bishop d6, e5, because when you have a weakness, you need to try to remove it, and this is an amazing plan to do that. And probably what black is doing is fixing the opponent weakness with the move b5. Now, I mean, BJ said f4 is the perfect moment. Yes, you would fix the pawn on e6, but on the other side, once you push the pawn on f4, your bishop on c1 will be starting to cry like a kid that won the candies. So then you have to deal with the bishop, and I like bishop g5 on the board. First, you bring out the bishop, and then you can really consider moves like f4. I really like this idea. Maybe knight d3 also. So make all the pieces happy first, and then you can go with moves like f4.
Yeah, very well said. And what's even more, what's even like worse for black here is that this bishop is the only defender of the square c5, and now after b5, bishop g5, this rook will move. Let's say the rook will move to an active square like g6. Bishop takes e7. Let's say queen takes e7. And where is this horsey heading to? c5. And it becomes really difficult to see how black can resolve those issues. The pawn e6 is a huge weakness. Pawn b5 is not the greatest, and you might even start attacking it. Queen b3, rook b1. Even a4 might be beneficial for white, since this pawn a7 is also very sad being alone. And yeah, where is black's counterplay? It's really hard to see, because this knight is becoming really strong, and e6 is the one that's being attacked first. c3 is not being touched whatsoever just yet. So black should start worrying here already. And we see a few moves on the board. Rook f7 has been played, bishop takes e7, and we are in this position right now. Rook takes e7. Okay.
I liked how you pointed out that the c5 square is now very, very accessible for white's knight. Instead, the square on e4 that would be like perfect for the knight to attack the pawn on c3 it's like very far away from the knight on c6, and that's why we come back to what we said yesterday, that a weakness is weak is actually is an actual weakness just if it can be exploited. And right now, the only players that can exploit the weakness is white with knight e3, knight c5, and that's why this explains the reason of the bar next to the chessboard. Our engine is suggesting that white is already slightly to clearly better, which means that it's a very good chance for Katerina Lagno right now. And I think that this point that the knight is more active for white, even if it looks very strange, the knight on e1 is just perfectly placed to go towards c5 or e5 or even f4 sometimes. So it explains the reason of the difference in this position. Two weakness, but just one can be exploited in the next few moves.
Right, and yeah, it gives white such a huge advantage. I mean, it was really funny to see that the pawn c3 was the first weakness in the position, but because of how the position developed, as we saw earlier, let's go a few moves back. This pawn c3 was the only weakness in the position, you might say, because this pawn is on its own, is not defended by any of the other pawns. c4 is not likely to happen anytime soon. You will simply lose that pawn. But there was another weakness, this king on g8. And for that reason, f6 should have been played, because if you do not play f6, once again, you will have some problems defending your king. Rook g3 will happen, bishop goes to h6, this knight will develop all the way to h5, as we mentioned earlier. But with the move f6, you're stopping all those ideas, because now the attention is in the center. This pawn is under attack, and if you start focusing on the king side still with rook g3, you're actually directly losing the pawn, but you're also going to lose the threat in the center, and the center is very important. They always say that when there's an attack going on this side, counter in the center, and it will be very difficult for your opponent to continue attacking you on your on one of the sides. So e takes f6, rook takes f6, and the point I wanted to make in this position is that this pawn on c3 is still a weakness, but there's another weakness on the board, e6, and suddenly black needs to be careful as well. They did solve the problem of their king being vulnerable, but now they traded that for this weakness on e6. And because of the move b5, this weakness is becoming more and more clear, as well as all of the dark squares in black's position. So bishop g5 was a really strong positional move played by Katerina Lagno, removing this bishop that is basically the only defender of those dark squares. And look how vulnerable they are. It feels like, I mean, imagine if there's going to be another dark square bishop of white, that would be insanely good. But instead you have a knight, and I feel like that's also pretty good, pretty nice for white.
Yes, I like to see that the black square for black are like Swiss cheese, you know, the Emmental with holes everywhere. Yeah. And this is how I describe black position right now. And I think the knight makes an amazing job when exploiting weak squares. And the knight on e1 is just going there. Chat was asking a very interesting question. Nice to take back with rook take e7, because it's a bit unconventional. You want to place the rook on the open files, right? Instead, this rook goes just behind the pawn. What is the reason? Probably black is trying to go for e5, trying to really just remove the weak pawn. So this is clearly one reason, or the main reason about around rook take e7. Now the question is e5 really a threat? Should white stop it with a move like knight e3 or f4? Or what is white going? I think knight e3 is anyway a candidate move, just improving the knight and going towards amazing squares like c5 or e5. F4 could be something that, let's see, we consider because we want to make our chat happy. But I think Katerina Lagno took a decision already and might be knight e3.
Yeah, knight e3 was indeed played, and yeah, it's basically a very useful move. Not only are you developing the knight, but also stopping e5 from happening. And I would say that e5 is not very urgent that you need to take care of, because you might think, okay, I need to stop e5 at all costs, and I have to play f4 in order to never allow this to happen. But if you play f4, you're also weakening your own squares. e4 and g4, the light squares become very weak. We do have to know that after f4, it is hard for black to access this square. Black will need to spend quite a few moves in order to get to e4. Yeah, by the time you get your knight there might already happen some other things. So you want to wait with the move f4 for the time being and focus on improving the position of your pieces. And knight e3 is a good start. This knight on e1 was not doing much there. A backwards knight, of course, doesn't really do much. But yeah, knight to d3, and it's on a clear, it has a clear idea. And yeah, we'll see what happens in the next two moves. And it's really interesting to know that Katarina is ahead on the clock by 20 minutes. She has 1 hour and 26 minutes while we are on move 19. Now, I typically see this, as we saw in the other game, we had a Ruy Lopez there. Typically in the Ruy Lopez, they play so fast the first 20 moves because it's all theory. But here, we don't have this opening. We have a different opening, the Sicilian, and Katarina is still in her preparation. And it may just have been the case that b5 was not part of, her preparation. This is the first time she was spending some time, a bit more than making the moves fast right away. And she found this idea of bishop g5 on the board. And yeah, she has a really good position now.
Yeah, I really like. I think the move she was probably having in her preparation, let's go back the moment before b5, was probably rook f8. And probably she just had the same idea of bishop g5, and so she just wanted to make sure that things are not changing with b5. And probably she thought, like, it's just better for me because b5 gives me a very weak square on c5. And I was thinking about, we are at move 19 and Katarina has so much time on her clock, but it's probably because she's just in preparation. And the moves that she played here are in a way like easy logical moves, even if it's not exactly what she has prepared for today, is the exact sense of her preparation. So she's very confident. Also, I saw her stepping up many times, going to just stretch her legs and showing confidence. When somebody is like standing up many times during a game and just moving very, very fast on the when she's back on the board, then I think like you are in trouble, at least from a preparation point of view. Your opponent has the best preparation on the board, and here Katarina Lagno has the best preparation and also at this point the best position. I was thinking about the pawn structure very quick, and we said always weak pawn on e6 and weak pawn on c3, but the weak pawn is also the pawn on b5. Now, black played the move a5, so that pawn is even a bit more weak because cannot be protected by a6. But let's remind that even if the pawn would have gone, let's try to put on the board the move a6. At any point, white could play the move a4, exchanging one of the pawn, and then there is another target. So this is also one more thing that we need to take in consideration. So probably what the plan of this a5 move might be to play, let's go to the current position, because might be a5 to play the move b4 at one point, and then if the pawn on c3 gets exchanged, the pawn on d4 is suddenly weak and the pawn on a2. So it's like, let's try to equalize how many weakness each side has, because it's very dangerous if you have the extra weakness, because right now a2 is doing fine, and the only weak point for white is c3. Instead, black has 2, b5 and 6.
Right, you're making a very good point, and I'm really curious to see what Katarina will do against this. But we will be going to a short break. Let's see what the players will do after this break. Don't go anywhere. This is the FIDE 22 FIDE Women's Candidates. See you in a bit, guys.
and welcome back to the 2022 FIDE Women's Candidates. I'm FIDE Master Alessia Santerum, and I'm here today with Women International Master Anna Maya Kazarian. I just saw a stare at the camera of Alexandra Kosteniuk. And did you see that?
I missed it. Yeah, I completely missed it, but it's really awesome that we get to see the live camera feed on the screen, because most of the times we don't get to see the players' faces during the game. And I feel like in an over-the-board chess scene, it's so much more different than when you see the cameras that we see in online chess games where players are at home and they're playing on their laptops. But yeah, then now we get to see their faces in the actual game. So yeah, this tournament is really makes it really exciting.
Yes, I feel like that having the cameras of the players makes also possible to do all the speculation about body language and, like, you know, if there are like maybe some drama between the players, if there is tension in the air. And so I like to have access to the cameras. This is very something very important to get some extra information that just the game cannot provide. So here we see on the screen, we have the camera of both match. We have the current position of both board. And Anna Maya, which game do you want to pick and see what was going on?
Yeah, let's have a look at the game between both Alexandras, Alexandra Goryachkina and Alexandra Kosteniuk, because we left off in this situation where white played move c3, and Alessia, a lot of things happened meanwhile. So let's have a look. You never guess which move has been played.
Really? Oh my god. Okay, let me try. Okay.
Okay.
Is none of the one that we considered?
It is. We did consider it.
Oh my god, then it's Rook V8?
Yes.
Okay.
Rook V8 has been played, which was the one that I saw in the database. I was caught by surprise that it is one of the moves, but it hasn't been played. Really interesting to see. C takes b4 was played, and bishop e8. Keeping the bishop on this diagonal, I guess it makes a lot of sense. And it's difficult to see how white can defend the pawn on b4. That's why white goes for b5 to exchange those pawns on the a file as well. A takes b5, a takes b5, rook takes b5, and here white develops the knight to c3 right away and attacks the rook on b5, so the rook has to go back. Knight d5 and knight takes d5. This is the current position. Wow, a lot has happened since when we left off. What do you think of this position?
Wow, this is very, very interesting, because about everything we have set up to this point about the pawn structure, we would say, oh my god, why does such an horrible pawn structure? There are two islands, you know, the pawn on b2 is on his own, lonely, and the pawn on d3 is also weak, the square on d4 is weak, but there is a but. And now the question is, how is black going to capture, with the pawn on d5 or with the bishop on d5? I mean, taking with the pawn will really make the pawn structure looking even worse. So probably I expect bishop takes d5, but I'm not sure 100%, because also pawn take might be a possibility if you can play d4 at the next move. So I'm not surprised that Alexandra Goryachkina is spending some time here to evaluate the position and to take some further steps. Why do you think is white having the advantage according to the engine in this position?
Yeah, it probably has to do with the fact, I mean, I'm really curious how it's like after e takes d5. I feel like it's one of those moves that you don't expect whatsoever. But if you take a closer look at it, considering that it's an actual move, after e takes d5, what I really like about white's position is that they have so much space. And the move you mentioned, d4, I really like that. So let's say the knight moves. I'm actually trying to figure out where does the knight move.
Yeah.
It doesn't really have many squares, actually. Let's say
knight b4.
Yeah,
is
knight
there
b4.
Tactic? Like rook
oh
take
yeah, rook
a8?
takes a8. Yeah, true. Yeah, there's rook takes a8, rook takes a8, and let's show that on the board. You basically get two minor pieces for the rook. and that is a very beneficial trade for
Plus,
the
look at
sides
that.
for
Plus,
with the
look at
minor
that.
pieces.
Plus, look at that bishop on E8 on E7. It's
Yeah.
not looking too happy. Instead, white pieces
No.
are so strong. The
hmm
knight on f3 can jump towards c6 maybe one day. It's a long way, but the knight can easily get there. Knight d2, knight c4, knight a5. All these squares are accessible, so it's possible.
hmm
And I mean, I would love this position with white, but probably is not what is gonna happen on the board because after e take d5, is this move played? No, no.
No, not yet. But
Um,
yeah, where does his knight go indeed? I guess knight d4 is the only other move. But yeah, the move that I wanted to illustrate was that you can play d4, but it doesn't seem like you're even able to play this. However, after knight d4, I guess it's interesting to point out that this pawn structure looks really, really strange. It's like there's traffic on the d file. Nothing is going to happen. I would like to move this bishop to d7 and make a statement.
yeah, that would be late, but honestly, it's not impossible that we might get to this position.
hmm
And then the question is, what about this pawn structure? Because the pawn on d5 is protected by the bishop on b3, and the pawn on d4 might be protected by the bishop on f6. So it's like, even if it's like very weak, these pawns might stay like this for a while. So yes, connect 4. We should play this once, Nawaya.
yes.
And it's like, it's a very funny structure, and there is a very high possibility that might happen. Because let's go back to the current position with the
yes.
knight on d5. E take d5 is definitely a move that we can consider, and after that, I don't see any other square for the knight to go. So it's definitely forced, right? And
Oh.
look at the ends she's taking with the pawn. Let's go.
Okay, so this is spicing things up a lot. And what I also wanted to illustrate is that after knight d4 takes, this bishop is stuck on a8. I mean, you can try to develop it by moving it to c8 or maybe c6, but if you play c6, you're helping your opponent because there is a double pawn structure for both sides. And if you play the move c6 at some point, let's assume a random move will happen like h3. If you play c6, then d takes c6, bishop takes c6, and those pawns will be very upset. They are permanent weaknesses, both of them. And the pawns on d3 and b2 are not much better, but they are better because they're simply not doubled. And it would be much easier for white to play this as this pawn is a passed pawn. So for that reason, I would say that White has a huge advantage given the fact that this bishop on the 8 is very, very sad and doesn't have prospects for the moment, whereas White has a lot of space and a lot of nice ideas here. And 94 is on the board.
Yes, this is so exciting. I think chat will be very happy about the incoming position. We didn't consider if white has any other option here, but I think I saw Alexandra Goryachkina going for knight take
Yes.
d4. And so it's official. We got the connect 4. I want chat to clap the players for doing this amazing thing on the board. Connected 4 is here. Maybe we can introduce a new variant, Connect 4 and chess. So
Yeah.
connecting these two games.
You
Players did
rarely see
amazing.
this structure, yeah. It's really rare to see this.
Yeah, this is incredible. And you were explaining really well that white is probably better due to the piece activity. Because this bishop on e8 is struggling to enter the game. And also it's in a way needs to be always protected. Also, the pawn on c7 is an easy target. I see moves like queen c2, rook a7, rook c1, and that one is attacked already 3 times. So it's not really I see some easy ways for white to go on. Also, this bishop on e7 can go on f6, but it's just going there to protect a pawn. So there are not really easy active plans. One active plan could be to play rook b6, maybe queen b8, trying to put pressure on the b file. But always you need to look for moves like bishop a5 or rook a7 anyway. Don't forget that you may need to keep under protection the bishop on a8 too. So it's complicated. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
mess position, and honestly, if I would look this without the bar, I would say like I would not be very easily able to say that white is better. But considering that, I see that the pieces are more active and I see an easier way for white to pose some problem. And so yeah, I prefer white here. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And also, part of the problem here is that you cannot even touch this rook right now. If you play rook b6 or even rook b5 to attack the pawn on b5, oh, it's not one black's move. I want to make this move. Let's say white plays
Just
anything,
h3.
rook b5, and then rook takes a. I'm going to take both of your bishops, and I'm going to enjoy my bishop pair and wish you luck dealing with those bishops versus your rook, because my bishops are monsters. They are crazy good, and with this rook also in the 7th rank, it will be very difficult for black to make anything happen here. White should be winning here already. So for that reason, you have to be really careful, and you cannot just move this rook that easily. And that's basically when there's very bad harmony in the between the pieces. This bishop needs to be defended, this bishop on 8 as well, and at the same time, this bishop cannot really move. So you have to play really carefully here. And yeah, I can see people blunder this tactic when playing rook b5. It feels like a very natural move. You're attacking the pawn, the one of the weaknesses in the position, but it doesn't work out. And queen c2 is actually played on the board. What do you think of this move?
Yeah, I think I mean I like the idea behind this move. Attacking the c7 pawn. We mentioned it before, a possible plan for
Yeah.
white, rook a7, rook c1, including queen c2. So yeah, it's a very logical move. It makes sense. And now it's like time for black to see how to go on because it's clear what white wants to do. Rook c1, rook a7, and so that pawn is protected right now once by the queen. And we said that the moves like rook b7 or any other move to protect that pawn with the rook on b8 is not really lit because rook c8, oh my god, it looks so ugly. So that rook cannot protect. How do
Yeah.
you do it? I mean, queen d7 maybe, bishop d8, but this also looks really ugly. So
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure. Maybe bishop f6 could be an idea because after you remove the bishop from the e7 square, then you can move the rook, the b rook,
Yes.
because there is not anymore the tactic that we have shown. So yeah, I think bishop to f6 might be that we see.
Yeah, bishop f6 is a very logical move. It feels like the bishop is supposed to be there. I don't see a better square for that bishop in this situation right now. So yeah, you need to defend the pawn d4. Might as well do it right away. It's interesting to see that the engine was not too pleased with queen c2 because it feels like a very natural move. And you don't expect this move because you're attacking this pawn on c7. You want to put pressure on one of the weaknesses in black's position. Let's see if we can figure out what the move was that Engine was very pleased with. Maybe Engine wanted to attack this pawn on d4. What other moves would you consider here?
I would consider bishop c4, and it
Aha.
feels weird, but the idea is that, of course, b2 is not really hanging for the same reason we have seen before, because you can take on e7.
Right.
Oh, sorry, on a8
On
first.
a8 first, true.
Yes, important, because if not, the rook on f8 is protecting the bishop. So I like the idea of bishop c4, because you can then maybe push even b4, just to make sure, and go with the queen on the other side. So the queen is now, before bishop c4, the queen needs to protect that bishop on b3. And so is not free to just go on g4, where it's like just an amazing square, very active, and connects the rook. So I like this idea of bishop c4. Looks pretty logical. And I was looking at the position and I understood the problem of the move queen c2. If we go to the current position,
Yes.
actually the threat on c7 is not really a threat as long as you don't have the bishop on b3 under protection. Because right now, even if you play rook c1, you're not threatening to take on c7. So let's say bishop f6, rook c1, and now
which one do you want to go for?
Let's do rook e1. And now the pawn on c7 is not really under attack because you can't take b3 is hanging. So maybe this move queen c2 is not too flexible, and we saw that most of the time you need to try flexible moves. So maybe this is the reason why Engine doesn't like it too much.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You're making a very good point. Queen c2. The bishop needs to be defended by the queen. Why not move this bishop right away so that it's not under attack and this queen can move wherever she wants to? She moved to c2, but she's still tied up to this bishop. And yeah, it becomes really difficult to see how white can continue as you mentioned. You have to keep attacking that bishop. And if you play bishop c4, then your whole idea of attacking that pawn on c7 goes south. It doesn't work anymore. So yeah, let's see what Alexander Kosteniuk responds to this. I find it hard to see any other move than bishop f6. I would say that that's one of the main moves. This bishop also doesn't want to be under attack because it currently is by this rook. So I'm expecting bishop f6. What other moves could be possible? Because it's so hard for black to develop at the same time. You have to keep defending those bishops, and yeah, I see very few moves actually.
Oh, Maya, I have a test for you.
Okay.
So, if you can play 3 moves in a row for black, how would you adjust the pieces? Because I think that sometimes making question like this is not realistic, but in a way can help you to visualize a plan. So something that an ideal location of the pieces. Would you like exchange the black, the dark square bishops, or what would you do? Because also bishop g5 is a move that you might consider at one point. Tactically, I don't think it works. Or maybe it works, I don't know, because c7 is not hanging.
Right. Yeah, you're making a very good point there. So I guess if I have 3 moves, bishop g5 is now very tempting. Now that you mentioned it, I really like this move because I feel like my bishop is not so great. I think this bishop is a great defender of this pawn, but if it's just going to stay a defender, I'm not entirely sure. Let's see, what 3 moves would I make? I want to remove this bishop for sure. I think I'll first try bishop f6. And I think my next moves will include something like queen c8, queen b7. It feels a little bit ugly and very slow, but that's the nature of this position. Black's pieces are very passive, and it's hard to see how you can easily develop. Maybe a better approach is queen d7, queen b5, for the simple reason that you want to keep this bishop open and attack d5. However, what I'm worried about is of this move bishop c4 still, and I'm never going to be able to cross all the way to b5. So yeah, it's it's interesting. Which move do you prefer yourself, bishop f6 or bishop g5?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. Maybe bishop f6 is more solid. Bishop g5, does it work for the tactical reason? Can we shortly check it out?
Which move did you mention?
Bishop g5. Does it work for the tactical? I mean, bishop takes.
Seems like it's queen takes, and seems like the pawn c7 is not hanging because the bishop is hanging.
Yeah, then this move is definitely something that you should consider, because the bishop on e7 is the bad bishop, is the bishop that is blocked by the pawns. And going back to the current position, I think that the 3 moves I would pick would be the moves. If we go here, bishop b7, bishop c8, and bishop f5.
Aha!
Because I think that this is a bit what I wanted to point out, that this bishop on e8 is so sad. Oh my god. Instead on f5 would be a bit more active, going at the same time against the pawn on d3, which is also a weak pawn, and going also towards the king side. So it gives perspective to moves like bishop g5. And then the queen and the bishop are together operating there. Also, the rook on b8 might finally face the rook on a1 with rook a8, so that the a file is not just white's under white's control. So this could be, but unfortunately chess is not like a game where you can just make 3 moves in a row, so this is not very realistic, but it shows a problem in black position right now. The bishop on e8 is not so active. It's just yeah, a bit there, a bit feeling too lonely. I'm not surprised if in 20 moves the bishop will be on f5.
Yeah, you're making a very good point. I really like your idea to move this bishop all the way to f5, because as we mentioned before, this bishop is not doing anything on a8. It is attacking the pawn d5, sure, but this attack is not really successful as the bishop on b3 is defending that pawn, and it's quite easy for white to defend this pawn. So you may want to give up on attacking this pawn and instead focus on something else, like putting pressure on the pawn d3 and focusing indeed on the king side. So I really like this maneuver of the bishop, improving the position of your pieces, and we might be talking about a complete different position because the pawn at b2 remains a kind of weakness. So you still need to deal with that, and yeah, it seems like things might be able to change. And currently, Alexander Kosteniuk is spending quite some time, which is very understandable. It takes some time to come up with a plan, and this is the right moment to spend some time. The players on move 19, and they're around an hour on the clock. So that is very good time management so far. What do you think, Alessia?
I totally agree. I think like yesterday I said a bit my cut is like by move 20 I want to still have 45 minutes on the clock. So if we consider that player did amazing, they will have lots of time for the second part of the game after the opening, the middle game and end game segment will be very intense. And I think here I really understand why Alexandra Kosteniuk is stopping for a while, taking time to consider what is the most accurate plan to pick. Bishop f6, bishop g5 or any other move, because this is now a position where she finally got a bit of hair, a bit of time to breathe. She was under pressure one more time, but queen c2 maybe was not the most accurate move, and so gives black some chances to strike back. I was looking chat and they were saying that they still want to go for h4, but I think, guys, your dream needs to come to an end. This will not happen. I can tell you, h4 will not happen in this game. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's fine. But I bet h4 will never happen in this game.
I'll give them hope. Maybe we can play g3 h4. That's all I can give you guys. Maybe this will happen, but I would be very concerned about the light scores. And since there's still light scored bishop, I'm not sure if it's a wise idea, but the idea is there.
Yes. I think Anamaya is a very good moment to maybe go check out what is going on in the other game, because here we know it's stable. Now we have this position with the 4 connected, and we want to check out what is going on between Katerina Lagno and Tan Shangyi.
Sounds like a good idea. We see that Katerina is at the board. Tan is not at the board right now. She's walking around. We saw a glimpse of that on the camera. But yes, let's see what happened in the meantime, because we were thinking that Katerina was in a very comfortable position. She was ahead on the clock, more or less in her preparation. And seeing Tan being so confident now, as it seems like she's on the cameras. Let's see what happens since where did we left off? Because it was looking really good for Katerina.
Yes, indeed. So we saw the bishop getting exchanged, this b5, a5, and now this was the critical moment. And we see, look at the time situation. I remember we were there with Katerina Lagno having 1 hour 26 minutes. So this a5 was clearly a move that made Katerina Lagno spend a few minutes. And she chose the move rook b1, right?
Yes, she played the move rook b1, and she spent a whole 29 minutes on this move. I'm really curious what moves she considered here, because 29 minutes is a lot of time, especially given the fact that it's not a really sharp position. There are ideas that you need to consider, but 29 moves for a position like this is a lot, and she can definitely afford it. That's not the problem, because they are currently on move 20, so she has still 57 minutes left on the clock. But if she keeps this trend, we might start to have to worry about her time management.
No, of course, if she keeps thinking for 29 minutes, after 3 moves we have a result, and congratulations, Shangyi, you won the game on time. But I think this will change. It was a critical moment, let's face it. A5 is clear the idea. You want maybe to go for b4 and try to exchange. We were talking before about how many weaknesses has each player. Right now, white has the weak pawn on c3. Instead, black has 2 weak pawns, the pawn on e6 and the pawn on b5. And so black's idea black would really like to equalize this. And by playing the move b4, this would be an idea, because then after c take b4, a take b4, then suddenly white has 2 weaknesses, the pawn on d4 and the pawn on a2. Instead, black has the pawn on e6 and the pawn on b4 weak. This is maybe a bit, or maybe we should show some moves. Let's just play random moves, h3, b4. The bar will not like what we are doing, but it's okay. Now we can see 2 weak pawns per side, and black can be like happy that can play against the pawn on a2, against the pawn on d4. So could be a chance. Actually, the Hanjin was not too mad about it, so it's okay.
H3 was a better move. Let's see.
Sometimes random chess is better.
Maybe we should have tried H4 to please the audience.
Okay, let's put H4 on the board and let's see how the bar will scream at us. What? Okay. I was scared for a second. Yes, the advantage went down.
Surprisingly enough, the edge is not unhappy with the move H4. So yeah, maybe that's a missed opportunity for Katerina, but no, it makes sense in a way, because how are you going to punish this with the black pieces? It's you have to be really creative to do so. And I can see Rook E3, Rook G3, Queen G4, H5, I can see this happen in the next few moves. And yeah, surprisingly enough, there's no way for black to punish this reckless kind of play.
Chat is putting a great move and brilliant move to H4. They are really in love with it. And okay, guys, you got this. It's not that bad, H4. You could have played that. It's fine. You won. Congratulations.
All right, yeah, that's really funny. So instant Rook B1 was played. So she's basically stopping the idea of before. I'm curious if after C takes B4, should we be worried about the pawn on D4? Seems like tactically speaking, it's still actually knight takes D4. Wait a second, I was going to say knight C5 and white is going to win the piece, but there's a rook hanging on E2.
We check, which makes the difference.
Yes, with check. So you have to move this rook, and then suddenly it's not becoming so clear, because if black has the center pawns, those pawns can be really strong. Speaking from experience with the structure, when you have when you play the French defense, once you have those pawns, they can go really fast across the board, and it's really unpleasant to deal with. So perhaps B4 could actually be played here by black. So I'm not sure what the reasoning is behind B4, Rook B1. Maybe she wants to bait B4. So I'm thinking of moves like Queen A4 to make use of the attack on the knight on C6, and maybe there are some tactical chances there. How do you feel about the move B4 yourself?
Yeah, let's put B4 on the board one more time. I think your knight C5 is also a move that you might consider, because now the D4 pawn is protected. So this could be also one more move that white could play. And then let's face it, it's not chess is not checkers. So white doesn't have to take on B4. White might just play Queen D3 next and wait for black to take on C3, and then again the weaknesses are the real weakness will be just the pawn on E6, because the pawn on D4 is really well protected, so shouldn't be a problem. So I feel like white has still some practical chances in this position. The advantage went a bit down, but still white is doing great. And also Tan Shanqi is spending time here. She's already on 5 minutes, so she's probably evaluating B4. But let's think, is there any other move like Rook B8 could be played?
Yeah, seems like a very reasonable move to me, to prepare the move B4 and make it even stronger. But perhaps there are some moves that, because it's a bit of a slow move, white has some time to make use of this. So you could start thinking of this move that you mentioned, knight C5. Maybe there is a possible idea of A4, and this pawn can get dangerous if it goes on and on.
Also maybe A3. Just stopping before all that. I mean, knight C5. I really like to win a tempo and place the knight on C5. Maybe we are not in a hurry, but we could either do A3 straight away, or just knight C5 first and then A3. So maybe like black shouldn't play too slow here, and if you want to play B4, play it like
now.
Right now, when you have time for it.
Yeah, because not only is it way too slow, it's also allowing white to play Rook E to B2. And then how are you going to defend this pawn on B5? Because now B4 feels like it's a bit too late, and I don't see any other move. I mean, knight A7, is that how you want to defend your pawn? And knight E5, it will be allowed for free. So yeah, perhaps Rook B8 is one of the moves to consider, but because of Rook E to B2, this might be even more difficult than it already is, because let's have a look at b4. Why would b4 not be working right now? C takes b4, a takes b4, and yeah, here we can see the problem already. So if you take on b4, the pawn d4 is defended by the queen, and if you take with knight takes d4, then all of a sudden, because the rook is not on e2 anymore, you can play knight c5 and win the knight. So that is the difference, and we see indeed that b4 has been played right away.
And yeah, we totally expected this move. It makes sense. It's the most logical move in this position. Just trying to defend a pawn by being aggressive with b4. And now we were considering already different moves. We consider c take b4. We consider knight c5. You also said knight a4, which is also very interesting, pinning the knight. And I think we will see. Let's see. I mean, does chat wants to help us with suggestion apart from the move h4 that we always take in consideration right now?
Yeah, it would be it would be a good idea to ask the chat, what do you guys think will be played here by Katerina? Will she take on b4? Will she go for the attack? Or will she listen to chat? But yeah, there's quite a few moves. Yeah, what did you want to say?
I feel like Katerina Lagno in the previous move, Rook b1, spent really a lot of time. 90 minutes, 29 minutes. And in this case, I think once you spend really lots of time, you need to make sure that you have an immediate reply after the most obvious move. So b4 is for sure a move that she must have taken into consideration. So I will be a bit surprised if now she invests lots of time before the next move. I understand that she might spend like 2 to 3 minutes or up to 5 minutes to just check one more time what she has calculated in the previous move, but I don't expect that she will take too much time. She will spend too much time on this moment, because she had to be considering this position already in the previous move. And one suggestion about time management that I had from a grandmaster is that every time you play one move, if you are thinking in a logical move and in the right way, you need to be ready to face the most logical move that you expect immediately. So in a way, this is also something very good to do in your opponent's time. While your opponent is thinking, just pick one move, the most logical move that your opponent might play, and be ready to face that move if your opponent plays it. I think this might save you lots of time, and it did save me. So could be a very good trick to use your opponent time as well in a very good way, because most of the time there are moves that we expect, and so we can save some important minutes on the clock there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing those insights, because yeah, personally, I really I tend to spend a lot of time, and then once you start spending a lot of time, it goes on for every single move, because all of a sudden your opponent's moves, even though you're considering them, they are still some sort of surprise to you. And for example, I can sense what Katerina is feeling now, because she played move rook b1, and logically speaking, it's basically trying to prevent b4, but it still happened. And then you're starting to think like, okay, what am I supposed to do against this now? Because she might have considered this line after rook b8, so rook eb2. She may have considered this and then thought, okay, b4 is not an actual move, you cannot play this here. But now that b4 is played instantly, which is not one move that you will think will actually be played, you suddenly have to adjust your plans, and the move that you tried to stop actually happened, and it seems like upon calculation, this pawn d4 is becoming a problem for white. So that goes to show it's really tricky to start spending a lot of time. You start seeing ghosts. Maybe personally, I have this a lot, that I start seeing things that are not there, or I miss my opponent's moves, stuff like that. And then you go down this spiral of spending so much time, especially if your opponent plays fast. That is the really dangerous part. So you have to keep up with that. And I really dislike myself. I really dislike it myself when I, for example, I have a capture and my opponent takes back, and I need to think already in that situation, what my next move is, what my move will be after that. Because I know my opponent will play this move right away. It's a simple recapture. So I need to be ready with my next move so that my opponent will start spending some time. But because if I spend even more time before this capture about my next move, then yeah, I will quickly go to time trouble. So that goes to show you have to be really careful with your time and the position at the same time.
Yeah, I think the point you said there is really very helpful. Once there is a capture and you decide to take to capture a piece, you need to be ready to play a move once your opponent takes back. Because sometimes the problem is the following: that then you you do the capture, and then after you realized, oh no, I shouldn't have done it, because you were thinking later about a move, the next move, and then you regret the decision. So that's why it's really very important every time you want to do an exchange first to think about one move that you will do right after the exchange, and to think it before doing it.
Yes.
So that you are sure that you save time, and you are sure that also it's a bit more a surprise for your opponent, so your opponent will have to invest more time. So I think is the right approach sometimes, to think a lot in critical moment and then having like confidence to go for the move. And here we have a move on the board.
Yes.
She took a pawn. Yes.
Looks like it. She took on b4, and yeah, this pawn d4 is now very unhappy, of course. Nobody's defending it anymore. What will Tan play here? Will she take on d4 right away? She should play it.
Oh yeah, I think knight take d4 is gonna happen in 3, 2, 1. No, I'm kidding.
Not so fast, not so fast. Yeah, I mean, a takes b4, obviously, like, it feels natural to recapture, but here, the pawn d4 is more important, and if you take on b4, you will not be able to capture the pawn d4 anymore, so knight takes d4 indeed happened.
Yeah, very fast, and mostly when you want to consider which pawn to take, so if you can take the strong pawn on d4, I mean, you should do it. You see the knight is there, and now you can see also from the live feeds, there are this pawn on e6 and d5 that, as Anna Maya announced before, they can be dangerous. She has lots of experience with the French. She's a French player, and so she knows that if you let the center free black, those pawns are gonna be very, very dangerous. So now suddenly, I feel like black is having really some chances to come back and to maybe even play for a win in this game.
Yeah, and whenever I play this position with black pieces, I'm always very happy when my opponent's pawns on d4 and e5 are gone, because that means my pawns will be very free, and not only will they be free, but I also get a lot of space with my pieces, and there will be much more going on for me, and yeah, I'd like to have that advantage. But now that knight takes d4 is on the board, what does white do here? Because your rook is under attack, and I don't really see nice squares for the rook. Perhaps rook to b2 would be an idea, but it already feels unpleasant to play this position with the white pieces.
I'm also struggling to find a good square for the rook. It feels like that rook needs to be moved, because we saw already an idea like knight c5 doesn't work because the rook on e2 is hanging with check. So any other move is not really possible. So what are the options? Rook e3 is an option, rook e5 is also an option, rook d2 doesn't look like the most appealing move, rook b2 I also like. So I think the 3 moves to consider are those 3. I mean, rook e1 is not really...
Yeah.
You are... Probably you want to use the fact that you can connect rooks, or you can maybe stop the pawn on e5. Just rook e5 I'm not a big fan of, because knight c6 wins a tempo on the rook, and then b4 is also again under attack, so probably also not rook e5. If rook e3, you always need to consider knight f5 that wins a tempo on the rook. I'm not sure if the knight is well placed on f5, so maybe rook e3 is still a possibility, so that the ideas of rook g3, h4, h5 are still possible, and maybe it will happen. So rook e3, rook b2 are my candidate moves.
Yeah, those are really looking good. And what you need to be keeping in mind here is that this knight might be really dangerous. And one of the moves that you need to keep an eye on is knight to b5. Look how weak this square on c3 is. Once the pawn goes to d4, knight to c3, and this knight will be a pain to deal with because not a single piece can attack it. It is very well defended. The knight can attack it, but it will take some time. And obviously, you don't want to sacrifice your rook for that knight. That will lead you to the worst position. So you need to keep an eye on those kind of maneuvers. Because the queens and the rooks are placed in such a way that you can fork the pieces, and you have to keep an eye on this. It's very dangerous. For the time being, knight b5 can be met with a move like queen a4. You have to make sure that you move your rook first, obviously, but for the time being, it seems all right for white. But this moves can be worrying for white.
I really like your idea. Knight b5, d4. And that c3 square doesn't look good. So, considering that, maybe I start to like rook e3 even more.
Right.
After rook e3, knight b5, you can go with knight c5, and then you're controlling the c3 square with the rook. On the other side, let's not forget that d4 might come with tempo, attacking the rook, and then the knight is really going on c3. Right now, there is a queen under attack on d7, so this is not really happening. But I think you really showed a perfect plan for black. Knight b5 looks very dangerous. So let's jump back to the current position. And is rook e1 played?
Yep, rook e1 was played, and yeah, putting the rook back to e1, it makes sense in a way because the squares that we mentioned, e3 and e5, can be attacked by the knight, and here it's at least safe. But it feels a bit sad to put the rook back. It traveled so much in this game, so it's sad to see it go back, but it makes sense in a way.
Yes, but this is really important. It's important we said that rook e1 is a bit sad, but if we notice that rook e3 and rook e5 are maybe not too appealing, and while we were evaluating these moves, it looked like so, because rook e3 might win black a tempo with d4. So then rook e1 makes sense, because one thing we said, you need to make sure that those pawns on e6 and d5 are not running too fast towards the first rank. And the rook on e1 makes a perfect job to stop the pawn to push forward on e5. Knight b5 is on the board, so we saw it in the right way. You picked this plan, and it looks very promising for black. And now the ball is to white. I think queen a4 is a move that seems appealing, but unfortunately, it seems like maybe you can just play knight c3 straight away.
Right.
No?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it feels like this knight is pinned, and typically knight b5 moves, they look really awkward, especially in this situation. I mean, what is the knight doing here? Right now, it has a direct threat to go to c3, fork the rook and the queen, and be supported by the pawn on d4 later on. Also, you're attacking the pawn on a2, not to forget, but it does feel a bit awkward to be on b5. B takes a5 might happen, and then the knight will be under attack by the rook, and queen a4, you're in the diagonal of this, and not a single pawn can defend you on this square right now. So you have to be really cautious here. But indeed, queen a4 can simply be met by a move like knight c3, and then I wouldn't be really worried for white here, because if you trade the queens off the board, I'm not sure if you're happy with the position with the white pieces, because your rook needs to move first, this pawn is under attack, a takes b4 can always be played, and this center might be pretty annoying for white. But white should be able to hold this because of this knight on d3. It's a very strong piece.
Wow, I think you said it really amazing. Let's jump back one more time to the current position, and this is the position we have top of the board. Katerina Lagno needs to solve some problems here. The threat of knight c3 is real. The knights are strong for the forks. Also, in the other game, the position is very tense. There are lots of plans. I see the bishop went on g5, so we will go there really, really soon. I think, guys, the game are very hot, meaning that we are entering the most excited moment. We will have a short break. This is the 2022 FIDE Women's Candidates. Be right back.
The strongest player, if you ask me, is gonna be Bishop and Kevin.
I queened you. Now let me get my own gal. Let me get my own gal. I mean, you my big.
His mind, you know, some of the things that he see, I don't understand how he see it, but his mind just kind of works on another level.
But I've been introduced to this game since I was 6 or 7 years old, and I'm 58 now. That's it. That's it right there, baby. There's so many different locations they play the game at. The third word is the heartbeat of the game. That's the heartbeat of the game. And that's how I kind of try to view it. And then let the whole world know that this is happening in Houston. It's well overdue. That's been really my dream since I started chess. So that's my purpose. It ain't so much to win. I love winning though. I ain't gonna lie. I like to win the game.
And welcome back to the 2022 FIDE Women's Candidates. Here we see the live board, the live cameras, full screen on Alexandra, the two Alexandras, Alexandra Goryachkina versus Alexandra Kosteniuk. And there was lots of action going there. I want to point out the two players are both on the chessboard. The tension is real, Anna Maya.
Yes, Alessia, it's getting very exciting. We're approaching the moment that the players are in the middle game. We're past the opening stage, and now they have to figure out what they're going to play, what plans they have in this situation, and this is the middle part of the game. The time situation on both boards is more or less equal. It's pretty good time management by all the players so far. But let's zoom in on the game of Alexandra Goryachkina versus Alexandra Kosteniuk, the two Alexandras. Let's see, because before we talked about this move bishop g5, and it actually has been played, it's on the board, but I want to quickly point out, Alessia, that bishop h4 might have been interesting as well. Can you discuss what is going on after bishop h4?
Well, bishop h4 is clearly avoiding the big threat of the move h4 itself. Clearly, that needs to be addressed. H4 was a clear threat. And the idea could be that this move is, in a way, provoking the move g3, no? Because you want to keep this bishop back. And sometimes Grandmaster love to do this move. They provoke a weakness and then they go back to g5. And now, after all, we can see that if we want to bring the bishop on a8 back to life, bishop b7, bishop c8, look at that juicy square they got on h3.
Oh.
So... looks like an improvement. And this is what like Grandmaster moves sometimes. They like to provoke a weakness and then go back and follow the main plan. On the other side, after bishop h4, if we can go back, of course white is not forced to play the move g3, and probably is not the move that I would play myself. That's why I think like maybe Alexandra Kosteniuk didn't go with bishop h4, because black is not forced to play g3, and then on bishop h4 is not doing much. He's attacking the pawn on f2, so maybe some queen f6 might force then white to take some important defensive moves, but right now is not forcing the move g3. So that's why probably Alexandra Kosteniuk went with the direct approach of bishop g5, offering a bishop trade. Did it happen or not?
Yes, bishop g5 was played indeed, and after that, Alexandra decided to play bishop a5, stepping out of the trade with the bishop, and instead attacking the pawn on c7. So queen d7 was played, bishop a4 after that, queen f5, and here bishop c6. And this is the current final position. Wow, a pawn on c6.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I mean, the trade of the bishops is on a way very good for black, because we saw that there was no need of like reactivate that bishop because white helped to do that by exchanging. Now there is not anymore the problem of the bishop. The bishop on g5 is considered to be the bad bishop, right? Because the pawn on c7, d6, and d4 are all on the same square of the bishop. But there is a huge but. This position is pretty much open up. And the bishop is having just an amazing game there on g5, controlling the c1 square, the d2 square. So I'm not really worried about how bad the bishop is, because I don't think it's a really bad bishop. On the other side, the bishop on a5 is attacking a very vulnerable point, the point on c7. And there we see black just play the move rook fc8, so protecting that pawn. This position, how to evaluate this position is pretty hard. Let's face it, if the pawn on c7 might fall at any time, then it's like a big, huge danger. I mean, probably it's like game over. So that pawn on c7 needs to stay there and needs to keep the position of Alexandra Kosteniuk all perfectly together. So yes, I think like rook fc8 was definitely needed. What do you think, Anna Maya? Who is better in this position?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, you might say that this bishop is not so great, but at the same time, imagine if the bishop ever gets to e3. That is the dream square. If it gets to e3, it will be in a very comfortable position. But for the time being, that is not going to happen. And it's hard to see where you can place this bishop on a better square, because right now it is indeed stopping white from playing rook e to c1, for example, to control the c file and support some sort of attack on the queen side. But at the same time, this bishop looks like it's on a really good square. Meanwhile, white's position, I mean, the white bishop on a5 is doing a fantastic job attacking the pawn on c7, but after rook fc8, the attack kind of dies down, and you don't want to play b4 to lock up that bishop on a5 and making it look very useless, actually. But yeah, it's actually hard to see what white's plan is on the next few moves, and I can see black going for moves like rook a8 or rook b5, or maybe even a simple like g6 or h6. There's a lot of different ideas here for black, but for white, I'm not sure. So I would say this position is around equal. I don't see either side having an advantage, but if I have to pick a side, I would actually, and this may surprise you, pick the black pieces.
Okay, let's play a game because I picked the white pieces.
Okay, let's
and
go.
I explain why. So I feel like this position is pretty balanced, but the players that I think has the practical chances is white. I mean, of course, objectively the position is equal. So these are speculation and our matter of taste. So it's completely fine when Anamaya says I would prefer to play with black, and it's completely fine when I say I would actually prefer to play with white. Then we can play a game, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Sounds like a great idea.
And the reason why I prefer white is because I see the pawn structure and I say black cannot do any breakthrough. Black cannot play any move that force something. But if in some magical ways, in an amazing world where white can play b4, b5, b6, and this is working, then white is probably doing very well due to the pawn on c6.
Agreed.
So I see one perspective there, and then I take the white pieces because I see a possibility there.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so this is a bit the reason. On the other side, probably this position is equal because that plan is very far away from happening. I mean, already b4, b5 is not possible. The pawn is like, that square is controlled twice by the rook on b8 and by the queen on f5. So we are very far away from seeing this into action, but maybe slowly getting there. I'm not sure if the move b4 right now is good, because in a way you're blocking your own bishop to go back at any moment. Maybe the bishop is very active there on a5, so it's not a problem. So maybe a very slow way to try to go towards this plan might be to play b4, queen c4, rook b1, maybe even doubling the rook on the b file, and then be able to play b5. And then you need to understand where the rooks needs to be in order to play b6, because it's not that b6, okay, GG, you win. But after b6, you need to be able to keep the b6 pawn protected. So after cb, you need to be able to capture back with some material. And then also the c6 pawn needs to be protected.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it really needs time to build up this plan. But I feel like it's a very reasonable direction where white might want to look into. On the other way, I don't see a clear plan for black. And so, I don't know.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I would say that, yeah, it's hard to see the plans in this position. For white, you really want to push the b pawn all the way indeed. It's one of the very few ways in this position to make a breakthrough, but black is making this very difficult. After a move like b4, perhaps a move like rook b5 will be played, and maybe black can even shift the attention to the king side. And
okay,
given the fact
put this on the board because there's something funny. There's bishop takes c7.
There's a back rank. Okay, so I'm not able to play rook b5. That does change a few things. So I have to play really carefully and consider playing g6 or h6 first. Now, typically h6 is recommended as it's not weakening so many squares. But with the dark squared bishop, I'm more leaning towards g6. So I guess I will play g6 first and see what you do.
Yeah. I think this makes lots of sense. You create some space for your king, and I was just distracted by the arbiter joining our live show. And g6 makes sense. The king is not really weak because the bishop on g5 is doing an amazing job protecting those square in case it's needed. So this gives the square on g7 for the king, and then your rook b5 idea is just perfect, just logical. blocking the pawn for a very long time. And as there is no light square bishop, that rook there is just very, very hard to remove. Reason
Mm-hmm.
why now that I see we add these more lines, I feel like if White's plan cannot really go on, then it's very hard. This precision doesn't look like Black is gonna be having chance to move on, but also White is just very hard.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other way, Anamaya, that we can maybe imagine? Maybe let's go back a few moves to the current position.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to bring the bishop first. The bishop on. Maybe you want to play rook b1, bishop e1. Something crazy like that. Rook b1, bishop e1, and then you push b4. And the only difference is that you can use the a file. Maybe rook a7 or something like this. Or maybe even like without pushing the pawn on b4, you just want to play rook b1, bishop e1, rook a7. And then maybe you go back with the bishop on a5 and you just broach one more attacker against c7.
There's
Again,
like a
I
very
feel
reasonable move, yes.
yeah, again, I feel like White has the perspective to try to organize something, but I feel like it's so slow that Black should be completely fine here.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, that makes this position so interesting. I mean, for the time being, it looks really nice for White. White looks more active, is attacking the pawn c7, but indeed, it is hard to see how you can go on from here. And I really like your creative idea to move the rook to b1, bishop e1, and then activate this rook on the 7th rank, bring it to the 7th rank. And at the same time, I guess White might want to go for a rook trade. Maybe they will go for rook a8. But there's definitely some play going on this queen side. And it leaves chances for both sides. Seeing that the players are on move 23 with each of them more than 14 minutes left on the clock. It's definitely going to be an interesting battle. Both players can spend quite a lot of time on their moves. And yeah, there's a lot to be played for here still because anything can still happen in this position. It feels like it's all three results are still possible.
Anamaya, I just got an idea that will
Oh,
make chat go crazy. I can tell you. So we have been
okay.
talking about h4 the whole time.
True.
But what about Black going for the attack and going for h5, h4,
Oh.
h6? Push that pawn as far as you can, because then if g3 happens, then the queen f3 and you get mated. I mean, it's real. It's really gonna happen. So the fact that the bishop on g5 and the queen are towards the king might give Black some unexpected chances to create something on the king side. So now, after this, after the move b4 is on the board, so the idea that we were expecting, I'm not surprised if instead of g6, h5 happens. H5.
Mm-hmm.
I say h5, just all in, go.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I did not even consider h5, but it makes a lot of sense because the idea is clear: pushing the pawn all the way, and you're not going to be punished for this. I mean, what can White do after move h5? Let's put it on the board. What happens after h5? I am failing to see what White can do here. Best you can do maybe queen e2 to attack it, but I don't care. I'll push the pawn forward. You're giving me more opportunities to move my pawn even more forward. And of course, White can always play, for example, queen e2, h4. You can always play the move h3. You can stop this pawn. But see how much space you got on the king side. And once you involve the rooks in the king side attack, suddenly White is the one who needs to be careful. And it surprises me that Alexandra Goryachkina is playing b4 already because her bishop is just locked on a5 for almost forever. I don't see this bishop moving anywhere else.
Yeah, I love to see that Olympiad said, if Black gets h4, I will gift someone a sub, which is very wholesome and probably might happen. I can say it might happen. It's not impossible. So I really like your defense there with queen e2 and h3. I think actually h3 ends a bit the dreams for Black. Only perspective could be to go really very much crazy. And so you want to maybe play bishop f4 and then go g4 and g5, f5, maybe g5, queen g6, f5,
Yes.
g4. But I mean, to do this, you need to really have Yeah, very, very dose of courage. So I don't
Yes.
recommend to go easily with this plan. It could be amazing if it works, but you need to consider it very carefully because your king is also getting exposed. So make sure that you are not just helping your opponent to attack your king.
Right. I mean, given the fact that there's a bishop on a5 stuck, you can afford some of those moves, but indeed you have to be careful because white still has a queen and two rooks, and they are able to be activated. And as soon as you go crazy, maybe even after bishop f4, you allow moves like queen e7, let's say, and then it becomes a bit tricky. Also, there's moves like queen e4, and that's why it's not so easy to continue attacking on the king side. But my guess would be that you can start by moving this rook over to the king side. Rook b5, rook g5 somehow. It may take some time, but this rook is not doing anything here other than keeping an eye on this pawn. So if you can keep the rook on the 5th rank and involve it on the king side as well, I think that would improve black's position a lot. So yeah, right now we're in this position. Let's see what Alexandra Kosteniuk will be going for here.
Yeah, so I want to ask chat, picking between two moves. I think Alexandra Kosteniuk will push one of her pawns in front of the king. So will she go with the solid g6? Will she go with the crazy h5? I want chat to pick just one of those moves. No other moves into consideration. Can be that she plays none of those two moves. But I want you guys to pick a side. I go with h5 because
You're siding with Chad. I'm pretty sure Chad will go for h5, but I'm curious to see if we have anyone in the chat that believes in the future of g6 more than h5, weakening the king potentially, but having chances to attack on the king side. I would also like to join h5 as much as I want to be careful and play solid with g6. I do believe in the prospects of h5 and the fact that it cannot be punished so easily for white. It makes it even easier to play h5. I mean, typically, if you play such a move, there's always some punishment, whether that's right now or in a few moves. But here, I don't see it. In the worst case, after h5, you can always resort to g6. Worst case, but I have a lot of faith in the move h5.
let's go. Let's go. Also, BJ says h5 for sure. Andron says I would go g6. Excuse also would go g6. Chesswin will also go h5. So you can play h4. I love it. I love it. Chat is like shifted, but we might see. Maybe we have one of those two moves, or maybe none of them.
Yeah, it seems like we have the mods going for h5 and the non-mods going for g6 in the chat. So yeah, we could have a mods versus non-mods battle over here.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
We have a question in chat. How about sacrificing the rook on e8 ideas? I see the idea. Okay, so it's a really crazy idea. But I have a feeling that you want to go rook e8, rook takes, and then bishop takes c7 to get rid of those pawns. But you believe in the power of the passed pawns. Unfortunately, sacrificing a rook is a little bit too much. You're basically sacrificing an entire rook. Okay, let's say g6 happens. Let's say rook takes and bishop takes c7, and it's a little bit too much. You might get to c7 with your pawn, but the c8 square is defended so well, and this pawn is not moving forward whatsoever. So
Well,
it looks really hopeful, but I don't see what's going to happen after this.
I really like how creative this idea was. If the pawn is on b6, I think white is winning. Let's try to see. Just play b5, h6, just random moves, yes?
Yes.
And b6. I think now the bar will go up quite a bit. Oh no.
Okay, it's an improvement. It's an improvement. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you can always sacrifice the rook in the worst case, and I think that makes it so difficult for white to play here. Yeah, it's a very complex line, but basically giving up a rook is a little bit too much unless you have a clear idea.
Yeah, of course, you need to calculate and be sure. Even if the idea looks really appealing, I still don't understand why it doesn't work. But probably black can just stay with the rook on b8, give back the exchange, and then farm some pawns in the meantime. Something
Right.
like this.
Yeah.
Something like this could be an idea. Just give back the exchange. You don't really need to, because if you move the rook to c8, then, for example, rook c8 here, then isn't there bishop take d6,
D6,
and then you fall...
queen d5.
Yeah, this is the problem, is that the pieces are just too active and your pawns are attacked. If you lose one of the two pawns, then it's over, because one pawn alone can easily be blocked. Two pawns together do very well. And that's why I wanted to bring the pawn on b6. But if even in this case the pawns can be blocked, then the pawns are just too weak, too close to black pieces, and will probably fall. That's why probably this doesn't work. And also, sacrificing a full rook is much different than sacrificing an exchange. I was shortly thinking that this was an exchange, but this is a full rook, so definitely it's too much.
Yeah, exactly. And here, I mean, b7 looks really appealing, but you simply capture this pawn on c6, and because you had a rook, you don't mind. For example, okay, the queen has to move, but imagine this happens, rook takes, bishop takes, and you're even fine here. Okay, this is a more or less equal position, but okay, I disregard the queen for a moment. But the idea is clear. Black can't afford to sacrifice the rook back.
Full rook.
And yeah, typically the sacrifice back goes with an exchange. So if you're sacrificing a full rook, that might be a little bit too much. You really need to be sure if your plan is working if you sacrifice a rook.
Yes, absolutely. But if it works, you get a double exclamation mark. Brilliant.
Worth it.
Worth it. In the meantime, we are at move 24. Alexandra Kosteniuk has now spent already 8 minutes on her clock, and she's deciding how to move on here. And h5.
It happened.
On the board?
It is on the board. Oh, we're getting to the position where h4 might be played, but this is a good start already.
That's super exciting. I love to see that. I really love to see that. h5, h4. Maybe the pawn might not push on h4 soon. Or maybe yes, because you want to provoke this h3. I really love this idea. I mean, I'm loving this right now. I don't know you, Anna Maya, but I'm getting very excited.
Me too. This is showing that Alexandra understands the position, and she decided to focus on the king side because that's where her chances are. On the queen side, it's looking a bit fixed, and especially now that bishop is locked on a5, it is not easy to bring the bishop all the way to the king side. Yeah, that's gonna take some time and maybe even some material to get to the king side with your bishop. But because she has a piece advantage on the king side, her main focus is on the king side because that's where her chances are. And these rooks can easily maneuver towards the king side. As I mentioned before, rook b5 might be an idea. Rook e8 may not be so easy to play because your pawn on c7 might be hanging there. So rook b5 would be a good approach, and that way you can bring your rook to f5 or maybe g5. You can also consider playing rook e5 as a trade. I think on e5 will not happen. You will help your opponent to solve the pawn structure problem, but rook b5 I think would be a good start. And at the same time, I don't see what white can possibly do to defend. Maybe there's a move like rook e4. You have to keep an eye on moves like d5. So that's not an easy move to make, but there's definitely some moves here for white to defend. But I would say I would feel very uncomfortable if I was playing here with white pieces.
Yeah, I agree. Like h4, h3 looks very scary. I think like the move h3 is necessary to play for white because let's show it. Let's play like rook b1. The other rook maybe.
Other rook, sure.
Oh, sorry. I should say it. h4, queen c4. Just white is ignoring all in all, and now is trying to push b5 or to counterattack the pawn on d4. Now h3. h3 happens, and now if you play g3, it's just game over. It's just game over. You just give mate on g2, gg. Thank you very much. Next game.
Yeah.
So it's something real, guys, and it's scary. Reason why, as soon as black plays the move h4, I feel like white needs to play the move h3. So let's go back to a few moves. When h4 is there, this move is very, very much needed, and it's very important.
Mm-hmm.
And we see the difference that the bar now is equal. Instead, before it was like terrible.
Yeah,
Just
exactly. Yeah, you have to respond, react on your opponent's moves sometimes, and not be very careless and focus on your own plan. Because sometimes it works, but in this situation, it's clear that this attack with h4 can be devastating, and this pawn goes really fast. Once it's on h5, h4, you have to start worrying already. So h4 is a natural response to this, just to make sure that h3 doesn't happen, and then black needs to figure out a new plan.
Yes, I definitely agree. So let's go back to the current position and try to figure out what are the what are the candidate moves here. We
Mm-hmm.
said queen e2. Also, an h3 immediately might be a possibility, but can be that white wants to play that move just when when black plays the move h4. Just wait
Mm-hmm.
for it. So in the meantime, what are the candidates? Queen c4 looks interesting, attacking the pawn on d4.
Mm-hmm.
Rook AB1 or Rook EB1 also interesting. I loved your Rook E4 idea too.
Also possible. Yeah, those seems like the main moves. I mean, it's hard for white to enter on the 7th rank. This bishop is still covering the square e7, but ideally white wants to go to that 7th rank. So I think those are indeed the candidate moves. Rook e4, queen c4, rook ab1 or rook eb1, either move. Queen e2 maybe as well to simply attack the pawn on h5, but I don't see a big improvement there.
There is an interesting question in the chat. A bit crazy question. What if white plays h4 now? I don't recommend to do this because it loses a pawn and bishop take h4. You might have thought like rook e4. I'm attacking the bishop and the pawn at the same time, but then your dreams might come to an end after bishop f6 is protecting the pawn on d4, and then the pawn on h4 is free to keep going with h4, h3. And honestly, I would be pretty scared to play this against anyone, but especially against Alexandra Kosteniuk, which is a very strong attacking player.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question to ask. If you're scared of a move, why not simply block it altogether? But unfortunately for white, h4 is simply losing a pawn, so you cannot afford that. I'm curious to see what Alexandra goes for here. Because yeah, as you pointed out, we have a few candidate moves, but which one is the most ideal? I really like your move queen c4 because it feels like you're improving the position of the queen, you're attacking one of the pawns, but you have to be careful that because the rook is on a1, you cannot easily capture this pawn on d4. So let's say h4 happens, queen takes d4, and suddenly there's bishop f6 in the position, and you might lose an exchange over here, and then things might go crazy very quickly, and I'm not looking forward to. I'm not looking forward to it from white's perspective.
Yes, indeed. And so let's go back to the current position. We have h5 on the board, and white needs to take a decision here. We are considering many moves. It feels like white needs to stop at one point the pawn to get to h3. So h3 might happen in the next few moves. What about going to the other game and see what is going on? Because I feel like here white will take a bit of time to figure out which exact move to play.
Sounds like a good idea. We see here in the bird's eye view, we see both cameras on the both matches, and here you can see all players are sitting down. It's the most I would say the most critical moment. Both matches are around 30 minutes now, but all the players have 30 minutes on the clock more or less. It's a middle game, and there's a lot of things going on, and it's not so clear in the positions what is exactly happening. There's not a clear advantage for one side. Let's tune in into the game between Katerina Lagno and Tan Zhongyi. Let's see what happened there. We left off. Let's have a look. Where did we left off? We saw b4 being played, knight takes d4, rook e1, knight b5. This is where we left off. Let's see how Katerina dealt with this position. Queen g4, knight c3 was played, rook b3, a takes b4, simply capturing that pawn, and queen takes b4. Now after knight e4, we have the current position. All right, what is going on here?
Wow. Can we shortly see a bit slowly the moves played? Because there were
Yes.
lots of tactics going on. So knight b5 and queen g4. Wow, this queen is going towards the king side, suddenly changing a bit the character of the position. Maybe you want to go then not anymore on e5 with the knight, but maybe you might go towards f4, h5, and knight f6, which looks very juicy, no?
Oh, yeah, that's a nice fork right there on the king and the queen. So you have to be pretty careful here with the black pieces.
And what did black play here?
Knight c3 was played, and that is attacking the rook, obviously, and then it was met by rook b3, attacking the knight on c3, and yeah, black responded by taking on b4.
What about the pawn on a2? There was a pawn on a2 hanging. Was that something that can be captured? Or
Yes. Seems like you can capture it. Okay, I was not expecting that the engine was very displeased by this because it looks like it's a free pawn. But perhaps there is some tactical idea here with knight to c5, knight to e5, or this rook is getting trapped because the rook is covering so many squares. So maybe there is move like b takes a5 first, and after
Yeah, I
rook
think
takes
this is the move.
a5.
Just
Yeah,
the knight is
perhaps.
trapped there. Just
Yeah.
the knight cannot go away because the queen on g4 is also controlling the b4 square, and the knight just has no squares. It's not easy to win the knight immediately,
Yeah.
but we can probably play moves like rook a1, queen e2. Just make sure to attack that pawn, that knight a couple of times. Oh, I really like the move you're pointing out as well, because the king might be weak there too.
Cannot move
Also,
to f7.
there is rook e8 probably
Right.
after rook b8. But
Knight
I don't know.
e5?
Knight e5, yes. Suddenly the queen needs to move.
And then
Like-
maybe, let me show that actually on the board.
Yeah.
Rook b8, rook e8, knight e5, attacking the queen. The queen has to keep defending that rook over there. If the queen moves, let's say, stays on this diagonal, you cannot go to c6 because of the knight. You cannot go to b5 because of the rook. So what if queen a4? Well, okay, first of all, there's queen takes a4. I missed that at first, but I wanted to show the beautiful move, queen takes e6. And that will lead to a checkmate, and actually you might have a smaller checkmate. Let me show that for everyone on the board. One of the most fun checkmates that exist. Now there's also rook takes, but I find knight f7 a bit more beautiful, and that will be a smaller checkmate on the board. Instead, if we disregard the move queen a4 because that's clearly not one of the best moves, you can also play queen e7. But then you have to be careful that you cannot really avoid this. There's knight e6, and that's a huge fork on the rook. And basically, black's position is falling apart. You capture this rook first, get rid of this rook, and white is up a rook. That's it. So, because of this reason, knight takes a2 is maybe not so ideal. White will capture this pawn, and things go south really quickly from here.
Yes, I think that was important to show. This was amazing, this motormate that might come. Your idea with rook b8, queen take e6. Oh my lord, that was really nice.
Yeah, attackers, you gotta stay sharp all the times. And let's see what the players actually played here, because we see some progress. A takes b4 was played, and here queen takes b4, which is really surprising to me. Like, I did not expect this whatsoever, because I feel like the queen went to g4 to attack on the king side, but suddenly the attention shifted on the queen side, as that is where this pawn on a2 is, and the pawn might have a bright future. Now, the interesting part is that Tan did not take the pawn on a2 here either. Tan played the move knight e4. Do you think knight takes a2 would have been possible in this position?
But the problem of the knight on a2 remains. I mean, after knight take a2, the knight still cannot go back easily. So queen g4 is now maybe again possible of any other queen move. I'm not sure what is the best square. We would need to spend some time there. And the knight still doesn't have an easy way to go back. So it's true that black has an extra pawn, but if at one point you lose the knight, well, that's not really good for you. So that's why probably Tan went with a practical decision, keeping the pawn on e2, go with the knight very active. You're cutting the queen, the possibility of the queen to go back on g4, and the knight there is just amazing. The only way to kick him, to kick the knight away would be the move f3, but you don't really want to play this move. We
Mhm.
were saying yesterday that every time you push the pawn on f3, make sure that is not a problem. And after f3, for example, I see moves like queen a7 with queen e7 with check. That would be
Ooh.
very, very strong. So not really a move you want to play. Your king will be weak for a long time. So the knight on e4 is very strong. And is this
Mhm.
the current position?
Yes, this is the current position. Katerina is spending some time. She spent quite some time in the last few moves, and that gave Tan an advantage on the clock of 30 minutes. That is huge, given the fact that Katerina was in her preparation more or less, had a great position right away. But Tan is playing really fast, and honestly, looking at this position, I don't mind either side. I would say that both sides have their advantages and also disadvantages, but it will be really hard for me to pick a side here, which side I prefer to play for here, because I like this pawn on a2 because it has a lot of prospects, but at the same time it can become a huge weakness, and for the time being it might be a bit difficult to push that pawn. And at the same time, black has this really nice center. For the time being, it's hard to see how you can easily push those pawns, because e5 weakens the pawn on d5, and the knight is looking at the square e5 as well. So you have to be really careful here. And of course, this pawn d5 is not going anywhere. It needs to protect the knight on e4. So both sides have their advantages, but also disadvantages. And I think that makes this position so interesting. And with 60 minutes on the clock, that's not a lot, but we do have to keep in mind that the players are on move 25, 15 moves left until the 14th move, where the players will get 30 minutes added to their clock. So time management wise, Katerina is, not on the safe side anymore, but it's also within the limits. It's not too bad.
Yes, I agree with you. It's like also the position we see on the board is not like the most complex position ever. I feel like right now it's time for the player to think about the back rank, the first rank and the eighth rank. I was considering some kind of lines tactics, and I always see that that is a common problem. We saw already before your rook b8 suggestion, and now I was calculating, okay, what about knight c5, trying to remove the strong knight. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
the knight gets exchanged, right? Let's try to do that. And now a2 is hanging. Is a2 really hanging? Can be captured. Is the eighth rank holding? Because now after rook b8, it seems like you can even go on f7 because there is not anymore a knight working, or rook e8 is also a possibility. So it seems like black is holding here and should be fine.
Mm-hmm.
So then this will not be good for white. And on the other side, sometimes white cannot move the rook from e1 because you might have problem on the first rank. So I'm not surprised if some move like slow move like h3 or yeah, I think h3 could be a move that might happen. Black already has some space on f7. As long as the knights are here, that square on f7 is not available for the king because the knight would go on e5 and goodbye.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have to be careful, and at the same time, you're making a really good point that white needs to start thinking about creating some air for the king. But this square f7 is not a great square for that king, and you might think like, okay, so what if I play h6 or g6? But the problem with this move is like, look how weakening it is. This square g6 is suddenly extremely weak. Imagine if a knight gets there, or if the queen or rook gets to g6 somehow, then things might start to be really tricky.
Anna Maya, f3 has been played.
Wow.
Oh my god! I think that like Katerina Lagno just wanted a bit to like provoke my reaction there because I just said like 30 seconds ago f3 never, don't play f3, and now she just plays the move f3, which is weakening the king. But according Katerina Lagno, this doesn't matter. And the point is that let's put queen a7 check because I said this move. And the reason is that after king h1, there is not even a knight on f2 because you can just take with your knight on d3. So as long as the knight is on d3, this is not a problem. And Katerina says, why should I move my knight from d3? I mean, I don't have any problem with that. So f3 is definitely fine. I'm removing the strong knight on e4. Yes, I like Chesswind writing f3 with the fireworks. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting decision, and I guess the point is indeed that Queen A7 is not the greatest move. I mean, of course, you want to try to play that, but you have to keep defending your rook on E7, and at the same time, as you mentioned, Knight F2 is not that powerful after Knight takes, Queen takes. You can simply play it safe, move your rook, for example, to G1. It looks a bit odd over here. I do have to agree with that, but you have to figure out what to do with your rook on E7 first. It's under attack, and as we exchange more and more pieces, we might go into another drawish endgame. And it's anything can still happen, I would say, because this pawn still has prospects and this pawn as well. But we're looking at another potential draw here.
There was a suggestion in the chat, I think Skew's pointed out. I was saying, I think that every time there is a draw, the players should be replaced with somebody of the chat. What do you think, Anna-Maria?
That would be an interesting twist. That's a really good question. I think that would be a lot of fun. Yeah, it would be
maybe hand and brain.
Let's make it hand and brain. And if there's a question to offer draw, then you're forced to say no.
I love that. Interesting twist there. So f3, will the knight retreat, or is queen a7 going to happen? Because if the knight goes back somewhere, then I think like white can be happy, because knight c5 might happen, and then a4. I feel like you pointed out before that the ace a pawn might become dangerous if white starts to push it. And I totally agree. So maybe why black cannot really go passive. Let's put knight on f6. It's a very slow move. And is this giving white chances to play like knight c5 and a4?
Yeah, I guess the problem with knight c5 is that you need to be able to respond to queen a7 still, because the knight is pinned. So you have to keep an eye on this, and also at the same time the pawn a2 is hanging. So perhaps for now you have to be really careful with the move knight c5. But another move that comes to mind is maybe knight e5 instead, because since the knight is gone anyways to f6, you can take the upper hand here in this position, block the pawn on e5, and maybe not attack this pawn just yet, but try to continue pushing this pawn. And yeah, after queen a7, at least you cannot capture this pawn because the rook will be hanging. So yeah, and it's exactly what happened actually. Queen a7 was played as we discussed. Makes a lot of sense, seeing that retreating the knight is not giving you this much. Perhaps queen a7 is a more safe option to at least be more active.
Yes, it's more active. You don't want to go with the knight back. Let's place on the board the king on h1, which I think is the very logical move. Is king f1 running into a mate? Not really.
No, actually not.
Knight g2 would be like, you would like to play knight d2, but there is a queen controlling that square, so you cannot really do that. So actually we need to keep this move. Is strange, but we need to consider this too.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, none of the tactics that you might think of are actually working. I'm analyzing queen takes a2 type of moves in my head, but it doesn't work. This knight is covering the square f2 so well. You can always capture the knight over here, and the king is extremely safe. King g1, you can always go back if possible, and it's hard to see how the pieces will be able to attack the king over here. So I think king f1 is actually not a bad idea. I would say that it feels a bit unnecessary to play it, but on the other hand, you do avoid knight f2 altogether, and this knight has to go back. So maybe it could be beneficial. For example, knight f6 goes back, and yeah, you can start thinking of a move like knight e5 actually.
I love knight e5. I think like the knight there is like so active, attacking, like provoking, well, threatening the fork on c6, which would be nice. The problem is always this king on f1. Let's face it, guys, we have problems due to the king and due to the move f3. So everything we've said, even if this move is played, it's clear. White in all these lines has some tactical problems due to the fact that the king is exposed right now. So f3 is, one more time, weakening your king. If not, white would be probably better here. And instead, the fact that the king is weak and that diagonal is weak is giving black chances to stay alive and having a good position. Was there a move on the board, or
Yes, correct. King H1 was played, and yeah, it makes sense. I mean, King H1 feels more natural, feels more safe. King of One feels like you're running into problems, and you don't want to deal with problems. But perhaps King of One was maybe a wise, practical decision to simply kick the knight out of here. I do have to note quickly that after King of One, maybe moves like Rook F8 or Rook F7 to pin this pawn and keep the knight on E4. Maybe that is part of the problem. So for that simple reason, King H1, and we see quite a few moves being played, Alessia. We see a trade.
yes. And now let's place the queen on f1, and I want to show the checkmates on the board. If the queen captures the rook on e7, let's play. I want to show the mates on the board, and here we have one of the backrank mates. So this is what is my feeling I had before. There might be some tactical problems and some just technical partners that might happen right now because the kings are not having space to move from the first and the eighth rank, and this is one example.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why you gotta stay careful and you gotta take care of your rook first. So a move that comes to mind is rook g1, just to be sure, just to be safe. I'm not sure if going to any auto square will benefit me because after, for example, rook b1, to strengthen this file, or maybe even rook c1 to focus on the c file first, I am concerned about rook takes a2. I'm ignoring this attack on the rook for the simple reason that there's a checkmate threat. And yeah, I would be a bit terrified here with the white pieces.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the rook needs to go on g1 at one point. So why to waste the tempo and do rook g1 now? So maybe we might see just rook g1. It's sad because it's a bit passive. But white will activate it once you play the move a4. For example, rook g1, and then the rook needs to move somewhere. The rook on e7 is now hanging. Can we place rook g1?
Yeah.
And the rook on e7 is now hanging, so the rook needs to move one more time. What could be a move here? Maybe rook a7, attacking the pawn on a2 once more?
Yeah, I like that idea. Definitely strengthening the position here, attacking the pawn on a2, making sure that, I mean, the only way that white can defend this is by playing a3. And if you cannot play a4, then it might be a bit difficult to make progress here.
Yeah, then it's just a very slow way to advance. On the other side, black cannot really advance their pawn too. I mean, e5, d4 can be played, but then the king is suddenly getting weaker, and then I'm not sure if like pawns can advance even more. So maybe it's better to keep the pawns stable and solid on e6 and d5. So I feel like this position is like very hard to make progress for each side. But let's see what the players will do, because I see ants moving on the chessboard.
Yes.
So something is happening. Ooh, a move that we didn't expect. Rook b to e3. That makes lots of sense. Attacking e6, the rook is still hanging on e7. Instead, the rook on e1 is now protected. My question is, of course, what about rook take a2? Rook takes a2.
Yeah, that looks really, really appealing to me. There might be some repetition going on here. I have a feeling that there's queen b8, king f7, queen f4, and black cannot step out of the checks. I mean, even if you try, actually, I wanted to try to find a way to cover the checks with the rook on e7, but that's not even possible. King e8, queen b8, and if you go king d7, you should actually be. I would be terrified to play that. I would just simply step into the repetition because I cannot escape it anyways. And if you go here, king g6, I might actually be losing.
Ooh, let's show this. Let's show
rook
this.
takes e6, rook takes. And
this
here,
is
the
very
final
nice
blow, queen g4.
Oh, nice. That's beautiful. I was looking if there was any mate with the pawn, but unfortunately, no, not really. Not really with the final pawn on g4. Amazing. So this is the current position with the rook on e3, the rook from b to e3, attacking on e6, and after rook take a2, we saw that there could be some
repetition,
some problems,
some
repetition.
Yeah, and that's why you have to repeat, yeah.
Yeah, players cannot offer draw before move 40, but if you're queen b8, king f7, and queen f5 happens. Okay, we see the board, the live camera very big, and the king is on f7, so it might be that we get a repetition. The queen is going to give a check, and maybe we're about to have the first result of the day. The king is going back, and now the pressure is on Katerina Lagno. She's taking some time. She stopped for a while, so oh no, she goes again.
Okay, yes. There we go.
Queen is on v8. The king goes to f7 one more time. I think we are going to see an handshake pretty soon. The queen goes back to f7. I see that the players are still not having any eye contact. Mostly you just look at each other because you know that the result is about to happen. Yeah, I see now Tan Shangi is looking at Katerina Lagno. The arbiter is also there. They give one more check, one more time. And now Tan Shangi is looking at the arbiter. The arbiter is approaching the board. I think we are going to see an handshake.
Yes, they shake hands. Well, we couldn't see it properly, but they did shake hands.
Thank you, arbiter. Thank you so much, arbiter.
Yeah, it was a gentle nod to the players. Like, are you okay with this? Both players. They typically ask the players first if they're okay with with taking the draw, basically because of the repetition. In case one of the players protests or is like, no, that did not happen, then they will obviously check this. But both players agreed to the draw, basically because, yeah, they both repeated the positions 3 times, and that is a forced draw. So this game ended in a draw, a rather surprising result, given the fact that the game started so excitingly. There's a lot of tension going on, and it seemed like there was a lot of prospects for both sides because of black center pawns and white prospects on the queen side. So given the fact that both sides had some chances to play for, it's interesting to see that it ended so peacefully in a draw. But yeah, basically it was hard to avoid anymore.
Yes, I agree with you. It was lots of action. I feel Katerina Lagno had a huge preparation, had some chances, and then Tan Shangi went back. We're playing some very important moves. We saw the move b4. It was very provocative. And so this is the situation right now. We have a result already, but there is one more game going on where the excitement is not yet finished. Here we see the live board. Both Alexandras are there, looking at the chessboard, thinking about what is next. And here is where we are having a short break, and we will be back. This is the 2022 FIDE Women's Candidates. Be right back.
What is this? This is duck chess, you guys.
This is a new variant. It's called duck chess.
Chess, but with a duck.
Quack, quack. How to play duck chess. The duck is a brick. Pieces cannot move through the square occupied by the duck.
Click on a square to place the duck. Oh, you put the duck to prevent moves of opponent, not yourself.
Yeah, so basically you do this, and this cannot move. I'm gonna go knight f6, and I'm gonna put the duck in the most inconvenient place for my opponent to move. No bishop, no queen, so no Londons. Can permanently stop the London.
Capture the opponent's king to win. Oh, wow. Oh, there's no stalemate. Wait, there is stalemate. But the stalemated player wins. Ooh, if only that was real chess.
I think I'm getting the hang of this game now. I think I actually am getting the hang of it. I think this works. Oh, that's a horrible blunder. Oh my god, I just blundered.
I have to move something else first, then duck, and knight will take my king. This is the best way to lose the duck chess.
Those some real bullet skills right there, boys.
This is the first time winning duck chess. That's so exciting.
Oh no! No! Mouse slip! No! I won! Yeah! Duck chess champion! Give me those points, baby!
And welcome back here with the 2022 FIDE Women's Candidates. Here you can see on the camera the two players the attention is on. We are in Uzbekistan, Khiva, and we see two Alexandra facing each other. With the white pieces, Alexandra Goryachkina, and with the black pieces, Alexandra Kosteniuk. There was a very interesting opening. Here we are, Alessio Santeramo, Women FIDE Master, and with my amazing co-host, Anna Maya Kazarian.
Yes, I'm so excited for this final game. We had the game between Katerina Lagno and Tang Zhongyi ended in a peaceful draw. It started off very excitingly. It was a Sicilian, and all of a sudden it ended very peacefully because Katerina went for the repetition, and Tang Zhongyi could not deny this, otherwise she would lose it. So it was a very fair result in the end. And now we have one more game going on, the game between the Alexandras. Now, we see that so far the games have all ended in the draw. Let's see if this game will lead us to a decisive result.
Wow, this is very exciting. I think that there was some like of promise in the chat. If the move h4 happens, there was a gift sub by Olympia, so the move h4 will never happen.
It
so
never
Olympia, your sub is safe. But let's see what happened. So let's go back a few moves where we were, and then let's go slowly to the current position. What was the move that white played here?
Queen e2 was played, so we discussed in this position moves like h3, queen c4, maybe even rook e4, or bringing the rook to the b5. We discussed all sorts of moves. We also brought brief attention to queen e2, and it has been played. Queen e2, followed by bishop f6, so defending that pawn on h5 like this, and also the bishop feels on a more safe square because on g5 is not doing so much anymore. But because the bishop left to f6, the rook now goes to c1, g6 was played, and here g3. Interesting move. What do you think of this move, g3?
Yes, I was actually thinking about the why rook c1 and why g3. These are the last two moves played by white. And probably the rook on a1 was not really doing much anymore, as the bishop on a5 is blocked, and so the rook is not really doing much on the a file. So I like this rook c1, protecting the pawn on c6, just in case. And g3 is probably, wanting to stop the move h4 and going h4 themselves. I mean, we know already that h4 will be played.
Spoilers!
So, spoilers, this is the move. This is the reason behind this move. h4, straight and clear. And so what did black play here?
King g7 was played, which is a bit surprising. I mean, it makes sense, as in you put your king on a safe square, and you never really want to keep it on the 8th rank. So putting it on g7 feels natural. But what I would consider here is definitely to play the move h4, as we talked about earlier, because whenever your opponent plays a move like g3, you do want to attack this pawn as it is in front of the king, and the more pawns you can get rid of your opponent's king, the weaker the king will get. So h4 would have been a good start with that. I'm curious I'm curious what was going through the players' minds not playing this move h4, because it feels really appealing to me. But perhaps she wants to take it easy. Alexandra Kosteniuk wants to take it easy and not take such decisions so quickly. So instead, she went for king g7. Queen e4 was played, and after queen e4, avoiding the trade. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And here h4 was played, ruining our hopes and dreams of h4.
Yeah, I feel like the idea of king g7 might also be at one point to bring the rook on h8 and to push with full strength on h4. I really liked, as you said, that the move h4 is something that I would have definitely considered. Chat would have also loved it. But probably, players see a defense and then they move on to some more solid approach. So queen b5 happened, and after queen e4. Yes, this is the current position.
Yeah, white played queen f3, and here we are. So queen f3, what is the idea behind this move? Because you're moving the queen back to f3. Could it be that white wants to activate the rook somehow? It's difficult to see.
I feel like White now needs really to struggle to find some plans. So I understand that it's not like immediate that you can see the idea behind this move. I'm thinking like just instinct says like something like rook e4, rook f4 could be some direct threat, like attacking the bishop and then the pawn on f7 is hanging behind. So that would be very dangerous. On the other side, what is black doing? The rook on c8 is still stuck to protect the pawn on c7. The rook in a8, I think is aiming for a6. This is a bit the idea. You want to play rook a6 and attack the pawn on c6 one more time. The problem is that white did amazing protecting with rook c1, queen on f3. So it's probably something that... so probably the pawn on c6 is just stable. I'm just wondering what if rook a6 right now? The idea of this move might be to stop the plan of rook e4, just mentioned. Because if you place the rook on e4, let's show it on the board.
Yeah, let's show it on the board.
Rook e4. Now the pawn is hanging on a6, and after rook takes, queen takes, and now rook f4 is not really working because you can just exchange the queen, and you're very happy with an extra pawn. And now black would have serious chances to win this game. It's incredible that the entry just goes all the way down with the evil bar.
Yeah, I guess because this bishop is so bad. So bad.
So bad.
So bad. I guess you can start... I mean, how do you deal with this? Because you cannot just move your rook around because you can. You have to play really precisely here still, but +4 is a huge evaluation. Maybe bishop d8 is a good start to move the rook around, and yeah, it's not so simple to convert this.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised about like the engine just being so strong, but probably there is some clear way to go on. For example, the bishop on a5 is stuck, so you don't really have to hurry with c5.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
if you play the move c5, then the bishop just gets some space. So c5, pawn take, then the bishop is like free to go. So I think really the point is that the bishop is stuck. I was thinking if there is a way to bring the black bishop on c3 or d2. It doesn't seem like immediate possible. So I was thinking about a move like g5. But I'm not like sure if this is like the right move. But anyway, here black would be just a pawn up and an amazing chance to win the game. I don't think this will happen, so maybe we can jump back to the current position.
Yeah, actually g5 seems like a really good move to indeed put your bishop on d2 and c5. But indeed, let's have a look at the current position. Well, I mean, you're saying that it might not happen, but I do see the move rook a6 being played. So who knows? Maybe we might see this position. Okay, obviously rook e4 will
well, not rook e4. Rook
yeah.
e4 will just not happen.
Exactly.
I mean, we have this position. Now we have to find something else for white because rook e4 would be just a gift, and I don't think Alexander Goryachkina wants to do any gift right now. We are we are far away from Christmas. It's not even December, so it's too early for that.
It's not even December just yet. It's very true. But yeah, what else do you do here with the white pieces? Yeah, I wanted to suggest rook c4, but I do want to point out that you're not really making much progress with this move because the bishop is still defending that pawn. This bishop is stuck on a5, and I guess the way to, I mean, you want to move rook to e4, but then there's d5, and yeah, I'm not so sure what this rook is actually going to do on c4 now.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, and it's hard to find a move with any color because let's try. I mean, I think that even if somebody would pass the move, nothing would change with the evaluation. It's not that if black plays a few moves that then suddenly boom, the position gets good for... There are positions where a tempo makes the whole difference, but in this kind of position, I feel like if white could pass the move, it would be a very good move. Nothing would change. I mean, let's try to play like king g1, king h1, king somewhere.
Oh, you mean like okay, just any move.
Oh, is white to move? Ah, no, it's black
to move. Yeah, because they played bishop rook c4. But yeah, it's even hard to make a single move with the black pieces because everything is stuck.
Yeah.
But okay, bishop e5 was played, and I think that is one of the very few moves in this position, because this rook can't move, this rook doesn't want to move, this queen, it only has one. I mean, you can go back, I guess, but you can also go to a4. And I would actually, out of principle, want to play rook a1. Just restrict this queen as much as possible. If only white has a knight to somehow attack this queen on b5, but it's simply impossible.
Yeah, I like this idea of rook a1. I was thinking also about any crazy idea the chat would like, because chat always likes breakthrough and crazy things. So is there any chance to make this position unstuck? I don't know if this is a word, but to make some progress here and to do something crazy. Oh my god, this move that you pointed out, this rook c5 is maybe a bit too much, because I don't know who suggested
I wanted to
that.
go into the element of being crazy and trying to open up the position, but unfortunately for white, rook c5, d takes c5, rook takes e5, you get the exchange. I mean, you lose the exchange, that is, but the problem is you're losing the pawn on c6 for sure, and then your whole advantage, I mean, the one thing that keeps your position alive will be lost. So unfortunately for white, that is not possible, but indeed it's hard to see how white can actually open up the position.
The craziness I was referring to was not rook c5. I was just meaning something like on the king side, like g4. Because okay, it's not too unreasonable. Now that the pieces, all the black pieces, are stuck on the queen side, the rook cannot move from c8. The rook on a6 is very far away to go to the king side. Maybe white might get some chances. Also, the rook on the queen on b5 can just go on a4, okay, and then so it feels like black pieces are very much stuck all there, and so maybe the move g4 might be something reasonable. And of course, it's a move that you are not going to take back, and so you need to be very careful. I feel like after g4, the bishop might just go back on f6. Then the queen is protecting the pawn on h5. So I don't know if this is a real move, but it's something that you need to consider. And that's why, again, even if the position is stuck, is blocked, I feel like white is the one that can try to do some breakthrough here. And maybe at one point we will see the move h5, h4 win a game. Maybe not today, but maybe in the next days. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you decide to go for pawn break on the king side, you have to take everything into account here. And it may look like black's pieces are stuck on the queen side, not able to move whatsoever. But as soon as you play g4, I can see many ways that suddenly the black pieces will come back to life. And I think one of the things that you need to keep an eye on, so let's say there's a random move. I want to make a random move. Let's play rook a7. I don't know. And then g4. What I want to even consider here is moving the rook towards the h file to attack the pawn on h4 and simply disregard this pawn whatsoever. Now, funnily enough, my random move was a defending move. I mean, that's how hard it is to make a random move, and it feels like you're not changing the position as much because black is stuck anyways. But the point is that you can let go of the pawn on c7, even though this rook is defending it. You can always you can even sacrifice it and just simply hunt down this h pawn, because this king is going to matter most in the end. So yeah, let's see what will happen in the next few moves, because right now queen g2 has been played, and yeah, the players are they're on move 32 with 11 minutes for Kosteniuk and 20 minutes for Goryachkina. Not too bad for both players. What do you think of the time management?
I think it's enough time. There are 8 moves to go until move 40. And there is, of course, Goryachkina has more time on the clock. 10 more minutes make a difference. It's double as much time as Alexander Kosteniuk. And I want to say one more thing about this queen g2. I feel like the move g4 is actually not really gonna happen because simply white could have done it before. I think the idea of queen g2 might be to play something like queen h3, queen d7. Something like this, or at least, to have this possible idea. You always want to stay flexible with your pieces and try to, go do anything that that is possible. Not your move, rook a7, your random move is played.
My random move. I wish my random moves were always the top moves. Or the moves being played. But yeah, I mean, it's so hard to see how to make a move here with the black pieces. I mean, you don't want to move the queen. You don't want to move the king. That looks a bit awkward. This bishop is really well placed on e5. Moving the pawns will weaken your position even more. So then this rook remains the only rook that makes sense to move, because this rook is tied up to the pawn c7. Not anymore. But yeah, I could only see this move because all the other moves just hurt my eyes.
I love it. I love it. And now will queen h3 happen? I don't know. I mean, maybe because now the pawn on c6 is not anymore under pressure, so you might consider to play this move. And then the idea of rook a7 is that now you're protecting the pawn on c7 one more time. So maybe you're finally activating the rook on c8.
True. It's still hard to see how you do that properly, because after a move like rook e8, you will face f4 and goodbye bishop. So, and yeah, where else can you infiltrate in the position? Because this rook doesn't really have many access points. I mean,
maybe you play rook d8 and you just say the queen cannot penetrate on the 7th rank.
That seems like a good plan. Rook d8 and queen d7 is not going to happen.
And then you really, I mean, sometimes, you know, there is this emoticon in chat, a stare, and this one and this, I feel like d8 is like saying, okay, rook d8, and then staring at the opponent, and what are you doing?
Yes.
It's like, funny move, just simply like making one move, avoiding what's your idea. And yes, I feel like it's hard to make progress here, but I feel like the players still will surprise us somehow. In some ways, I feel something is still possible in this position.
Oh, your move has been played, Alessia. Queen h3 is on the board. Here we go.
Yes, the big brain thinks similar.
True. Next year, Alessia, next edition, we are playing.
Yes, let's go.
Sounds like a great idea. But yeah, rook d8 has been played as well. There you go. And yeah, it's so interesting to see this position, because, you know, you'd say that black is stuck with the pieces. You cannot move anything whatsoever. You cannot make any progress, but so does white. I mean, white has more space, of course, but where are the entry points? The pieces are placed in such way, they're blocking each other. They're not able to get past the opponent's pieces. The best you can do here with white is play f4, but after bishop f6, I don't see a single entry point for white. And if you go really crazy with g4 and f5 and so on, you might be the one having problems on your king side. So queen g2 has been played. Alessia, are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. It's definitely something that could happen. I mean, the queen is going back home, but it can also be that players are just, I mean, Goryachkina tried it, and sometimes you have to try things and go back and try some more things. So it's not like 100% that we might see a threefold repetition here, but it's a possibility. I'm thinking what you're thinking too, but I'm not at all.
You're not convinced yet.
No, not convinced yet. Also, Alexandra Kosteniuk is taking time to think, because why should you go? Basically, in order to repeat, you need to go with the rook on c8.
Yeah.
It would be like a move that like doesn't improve your position, but rather makes it worse in a way. I mean, why should you place your rook on c8 again? So maybe Alexandra will try another move, or maybe she feel like I actually don't have another move, because rook e8, as you pointed out, is not really appealing.
Yeah, I think black is the one that wants to go for a draw here. There are no moves for black whatsoever. So if you can go for a draw, I think that is the best move to make rather than any other move. Because, I mean, you can think of moves like bishop f6, like just to avoid the repetition. But what's next? Are you going to attack on the king side somehow? Are you that convinced that you can play queen f5, g5, and really start an attack there? And that's what Alexandra Kosteniuk, I think, is now thinking about, and she plays the rook c8.
Okay.
Queen h3 has been played.
Okay. I think then it's time to call the arbiter.
Yes, there we see threefold repetition. Let's look at the camera. Are the players agreeing to a draw?
And I think it's another repetition. I think it's time. We see Queen G1, Queen G2 for the third time on the board. So I think Alexandra Kosteniuk is now looking around, looking at the score sheet, and she's like making sure that she is repeating the position for the third time. Rook C8 is on the board. And now, I think, is the moment.
This is the moment. Who is going to claim it?
Is the moment. Let's explain shortly how you do it. In order to claim a draw here, you have to write your next move. So in this case, White needs to write Queen H3 on the board and then call the arbiter and say, with my next move, it will be threefold repetition. The arbiter needs to check, and then the draw can be agreed. This is the right partner to make a draw in this position.
Exactly.
Let's see if this is what is gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, your opponent can always decline the draw. So if you offer a draw to your opponent without claiming it to the arbiter, it basically means that you're just offering a draw and they can decline it and then play another move, and then you can continue forever again.
I see the arbiter approaching the board. He's looking
Pause
at the two player and saying, okay. And you see, Alexandra is writing a move, looking at the arbiter. This is how you do it. And the players are shaking their hands. The game is officially over. We have a second draw for the second game. 2 days, 2 draws. This is pretty symmetrical.
Yeah, exactly. It's rather surprising to see the draws happen so easily. The positions seem very tense, very exciting, and all of a sudden it's decided and ended in the draw after so much fight early on in the games. The matches are now tied 1-1, both of them. And yeah, there's 2 more games and matches. I'm curious, do you think there might be a tiebreak coming up?
Wow, this is a very, very nice question. It's like early because there are still like 2 more games, 2 more fights in classical chess. But I mean, it started like in the most peaceful way. 4 games, 4 draws. So I really understand your question, and I don't have the answer. I think worst case we organize a wild tiebreak. And here we see Alexandra Goryachkina leaving the playing goal, followed by Alexandra Kosteniuk. I feel like we might organize a Twitch tiebreak and then Brain. Maybe we involve the commentators.
I like that. I like that. Yeah. That would be amazing for sure. But yeah, it would be interesting to see if the matches go into a tiebreak, because now both scores in the matches are 1-1. Not a single decisive result just yet, but there's still 2 games in each match to be played, and I'm really looking to see what fire we're going to see tomorrow.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is exciting. Let's remind everyone the tie-break format. So players, in case this ends in 2-2, players will play a 4-game match of 15 plus 10. So this is rapid chess. And if this is still a tie, then they will play 2 games of 5 plus 2 or 5 plus 3. If this is still a tie, then there will be 1 game of 3 plus 2, and then alternate colors until there is 1 game with this decisive result. I'm sad that this doesn't go down until 10 seconds chess. Have you ever played an Amaya 10 seconds chess?
I actually don't remember, probably, but it's really like far in my memory. I've definitely played some crazy time controls online, but over the board, I'm not sure what the fastest time control is that I've played. Maybe like 1 minute or 2 minutes on the clock. But if there's one variant, one time control that's crazy, it's Armageddon.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. This is like this would be like really fire. Armageddon, for those who might not be familiar, is like a version of chess where one side, mostly black, has less time on the clock. And white needs to play just for a win. So with a draw, black is winning the game. So it's a very exciting way to do a tiebreak. I feel like we should like remind our viewers what is the next appointment, because we are going to come back on Friday. So tomorrow is a break for the players. They will probably rest. and they are going to prepare for the incoming round on Friday. As you can see here, the amazing schedule. We have Game 3 on Friday, December 2 at the same time, 2 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Central European time. And we will be here back one more time to cover this amazing tournament. The fun has been real up to this moment. I know that the result is like 4 draws, but I can say 100% these were 4 exciting battles. Ended up in a peaceful way, but they were real. There was fire on the board. Any final thought, Anamaya?
Yeah, Alessia, it was a pleasure commentating with you once again. We had some amazing fight today between the two games, between the players, and I'm really excited to see their next games, and maybe the matches will head into a tiebreak. That will be even more exciting with faster time control and even more fireworks on the board. But it was a very exciting day today. I hope you guys all in the chat enjoyed it. It was amazing to commentate with you, Alessia.
Also for me, the pleasure was really big. I also want to thank our amazing producer, Bigfoot, that is helping us with everything, and it was amazing. So chat, please clap him. And the appointment is on Friday, 2 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Central European time. This is the 2022 FIDE Women's Candidates. The second day is coming to an end. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching, and see you on Friday.
See you.